Report Flight 1969, service to JetNation Radio.
Look at what a leader this guy is.
Bowles is fighting for his job this year.
This is what quarterbacks are made of.
Doug Middleton get a 50-yard onside kick. How stupid can you possibly be making that much money?
Folks, grab a snack.
Let's go to eat a goddamn snack.
And join Joe Blewett and Glenn Naughton for JetNation Radio.
And you are listening to the 11th edition of the watchable version of JetNation Radio on YouTube after our week hiatus because I was sick with the flu and pneumonia for I'm still technically sick, but it's been about 2 weeks. But fighting off to do a show for you guys tonight because we can't just skip a whole bunch of weeks here. So we're excited to be back. Glenn, my man, what's up?
Not a whole lot, Joe. Glad you're feeling better. I know you messaged me a day or two before the show last week, and you were like, you feeling like it may not happen.
No way.
Glad you're up and about again, on the mend, as they say. And hey, we have breaking Jets news to cover, just here in the last 20 minutes or so. So let's get rolling. However you want to start this thing off.
Yeah. Like 103 fever for like 8 days was not too good. I told you I lost like 10 pounds, so I got to start packing on some weight and eating some burgers again. This, like I said, we will get into everything that's happened, the John Morton firing. We're going to be talking about the Jets overall roster. We'll be looking at the Jets free agents. We're going to be looking at the Jets rookie class and how they performed in 2017, and we'll go over some other minor news. I'll ask Glenn if he knows some stuff because I've been out of the loop for about a week. Glenn, is there anything this past week that you wrote or were on, or anything that you want people to go check out that you were?
Just standard updates on JetNation.com. Check out the homepage. Check out the forums. I did do a brief, a quick article today on the Robby Anderson situation. Not just the situation itself, but where it leaves the Jets. Because let's face it, this isn't a receiving core that. This isn't like a top-notch core, but it was good enough that it probably wasn't a huge priority heading into free agency in the draft. Maybe look at some mid-level free agents or, mid-late round receivers. But now with, prior to this, the biggest question mark was Quincy Enunwa. Now, you don't know if Enunwa is going to be the same guy. You don't know how long Robby Anderson is going to be suspended for. I don't think the Jets will let him go, but I don't think it's out of the question if it turns out the reports of what he did are true. So basically, beyond this year, you got 2018 coming still, but beyond this season, the only receivers under contract are, Jermaine Kearse, Chad Hansen, Ardarius Stewart, and Sharon Peak. So, with Robby and Quincy Enunwa.
Enunwa still has to be extended for this year coming up if the Jets want to keep him.
Right, but he's an exclusive rights free agent. So I think as long as he shows up and all of his medical stuff checks out, they'll bring him back in. But I think one of the best comments I heard on player recovery and player tests and finding out if guys are ready a few years ago. I'm trying to remember, they may have been talking about there was J.J. Watt. They were talking about J.J. Watt's back injury on Sirius XM. And it was Pat Kerwin. Pat Kerwin said, they have all these tests to see if you can be medically cleared to play, but none of those tests is getting run into by a 300-pound man during a football game. Like you might withstand all the medical tests, and then you take one hit and your body can't stand up to it. So too many question marks. And now at least you had a guy in Robby. You can say, all right, we have a guy who's proven he can take the top off the defense, draw extra coverage from a safety, open things up underneath. Now, is he looking at a multi-game suspension? Is he going to be gone? Who knows? So that kind of complicates things even further.
Yeah,
it really is one of the few areas on the team where you felt comfortable, and even that now is.
Yeah, we'll get into all the charges and stuff like that, Glenn. I have it up on my phone. We'll go through it later. Exactly. I don't know if you have all the 9 charges or whatever it was, but we can go through just the generic type of thing.
I don't have them.
like I said, we'll go through it in a little bit. There's a whole police report I read, but I'm not going to read 3 pages, 500 words to everybody listening to the show because I'm pretty sure they would click off. But I did a Quincy.
9 counts of being an idiot. How about that?
Yeah. Basically, he's an asshole, but we'll talk about his assholeism farther on in the show. But this week, assholery, I don't know. But yeah, so like I said, this week I did a Quincy Enunwa film review. It's about 47 plays, or I think whenever I finished it, the last 2 weeks have been cloudy, but I did a Quincy Enunwa film review if you want to check that out. Right now I'm working on a Jamal Adams review. I'm on recording about the 7th or 8th game. That's probably going to be, I would say, around 100 plays. So if you really want to take a deep dive into me with Jamal Adams film, like I said, 100 plays, it's going to be very, very extensive. I went on the Turn on the Jets podcast last Wednesday with Joe Caporoso. We recorded about the Jets free agency, some needs, some underrated, overrated guys, stuff like that. So if you want to check that out, go ahead. I was on there with them. We didn't get any reviews the last 2 weeks, so our listeners are a bunch of bums. We love you guys, but you're a bunch of bums. And then the final thing, Glenn, before we get into it, is go to YouTube, subscribe. We get a couple of listeners there, not as many as I would necessarily like, but like I said, I understand it's a lot easier to just listen. But if you want to follow along in the film, we probably put up anywhere from 15 to 30, 35 plays every single time when we're talking. So like I said, go to YouTube, go to JetNation, hit subscribe. You'll get a notification on your YouTube app every time that we go and post an episode up there. So Glenn, we'll get into the firing of John Morton first. News that broke last Wednesday. Like I said, there was no freaking way I could barely stand up without almost gagging and throwing up in a toilet. So I couldn't do a show last week. So everybody's gonna have to forgive me. But the Jets Wednesday.
So it was like watching a Jets game.
Yeah, basically. I don't know. Yeah, it's just as bad, I guess. But the Jets fired John Morton, a guy who I liked a lot more than other Jets fans did. And I think other Jets fans, when you look at the statistics, I don't know exactly where they finished in offense. Glenn, I know like efficiency or whatever, they were 24th, but then other rankings, they were 26th. Some other rankings, they were 27th. I'm not sure exactly which one is the bread and butter go-to rankings. But anyway, I'll say anywhere from 24th to 26th. Was an offense that was supposed to be historically bad, an offense that I personally expected to be bottom 3 in the entire league, probably number 2 to the Cleveland Browns, and they weren't. A lot of people come out and say that John Morton, the Jets come out fast starts, 10, 13 points in the first quarter, the first half, and then they would fizzle out. But the problem with that is, it was good that the Jets came out for 13 points and all that stuff, but then people got mad at the fizzling out. The problem with the fizzling out was the Jets didn't have the talent on the team to really, keep on with the 13 points, 10 points in the first quarter, because look at the offensive line, look at the skill positions. Even though you say, Powell was good, Forte was okay, they're still average players at best. Even the receiving core was average at best this year at times. I would say below average, because other than Robby Anderson, they're all journeymen, or rookies who are just okay players at very best. So the Jets couldn't sustain it, but there were some games where, versus the Chiefs where they scored 38. Versus the Buffalo Bills at home, they scored 37. Versus the Carolina Panthers, who have a air quotes good defense, they put up 31 points versus that team. So there were some games that they broke out and played pretty well. And say the rankings all you want, the Jets average 18 points, they finished at 26th. I thought they were going to finish almost dead last and average like 17 points a game. So John Morton overexceeded my expectations with a lack of weapons, with a lack of an offensive line, with a quarterback who's 38 years old. So I liked Morton. I wanted him to stick around. Apparently, there were some problems in the locker room. There were some coaches who were rubbed the wrong way. Glenn, just initial thoughts, and we'll dive into it a little bit more deep.
Well, I think that a lot of fans, myself included, were disappointed initially. I know that, of course, I think I messaged you, and I did a short article on that as well. The tweets that we saw from Manish, I thought it was kind of clear that he was hinting at a change at OC. He did the article saying Morton wasn't safe, and then 2 or 3 days later he starts sending out these, a storm is brewing, something's coming. So that that obviously that's what he was talking about. I think that, again, initially I was disappointed, but then regardless of what I may think of Todd-Bowles, as a head coach, he is the head coach. And if the head coach is telling the offensive coordinator how he wants a game plan design, not calling the plays, but if you're saying I want X, Y, Z, you do it. And, the reports I read is that were that John Morton wasn't doing that. But at the same time, though, if we're to believe as it's being reported, was that Todd-Bowles wanted to run the ball more and John Morton wouldn't, I don't know how they don't get on the same page there. I mean, all John Morton should have to do is show Todd-Bowles a couple of minutes of film of that interior offensive line, and Todd-Bowles should be happy to go 5 wide the rest of the year and not run the ball, because there's a reason why John Morton wasn't running it. So it's one of those unfortunate situations where you got to do what your boss tells you. And really, in that case, all John Morton would have had to do was run the ball and say, hey, Todd, you see that we scored 9 points today because we ran the ball, because we couldn't move it down the field. So should they have been running the ball? No. John Morton was doing the right thing in trying to win. But like it or not, you got to do what your boss tells you or you get fired. And that's what happened.
Yeah. And we talked about it many times. There were some games, Glenn, where fans would come out and say, "Oh, well, they should have ran the ball this time on 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1," and the Jets' offensive line just couldn't hold up in the run game at all.
And when they did run the ball, they were terrible in short yardage situations.
Absolutely terrible. So you can't run.
I still hear people. I don't even remember what game it was now. What game was it when they were on the 1 and they threw it 3 times in a row? Was it against Carolina?
Oh God, maybe it was against Carolina.
I still hear people coming out and criticizing that. I hear Joe Beningo screaming at Manish Mehta last week. Why are you throwing the ball 3 times from the 1 yard line? It's like, because they have no run game. If you had a run game, of course you're going to run it once or twice. But when you're getting pushed into the backfield, into the offensive backfield, every time you run the ball in short yardage, I have zero problem with throwing it 3 times. I mean, sure, mix in a play action, whatever, but I have zero issue running the ball or throwing the ball 3 times.
But even
your offensive line is playing that poorly.
Even play action, the way that play action is really effective is when you could set up the run game where teams are actually threatened by the run, where the linebackers will cheat up. When your run game is so bad, the linebackers aren't going to cheat up really anyway. So the play action is effective when the run game is working. That's why the Jets were effective with the play action when Mark Sanchez was here, because Thomas Jones and Leon Washington and those guys would jam it down your throat, and then the linebackers and the safeties would cheat up a little bit, and then Mark Sanchez would throw it over their heads. As not like Mark Sanchez is Peyton Manning or anything, but that's why that.
I mean, they're going to be they're going to be around the line in the end zone either way. But I get what you're saying. But it's just a matter of, if you want to mix it up, I understand that. But I have no problem with not running it when the O-line is that bad. Yeah,
and I liked his concepts. You saw the pole concept, hawk concept, crease concept, sail concept, Hank concept, and you saw Petty come in, and then you see the flat sevens, you see the screens, you see the tosser concepts, all the stuff that's really, really simplistic reads. So he adjusted to Petty, and people will say, well, Petty was this bad and he was that bad. Listen, the best offensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, couldn't fix Bryce Petty at this point, probably. I'm not going to say definitely, because it's Bill Belichick, so you never really know, because he's amazing. But still, it's, he wasn't working with a lot. Even when McCown was in, it's McCown and a terrible offensive line that you can't run the ball and support the passing game. So I liked Morton a lot. I think if Morton came back here and you gave him, let's say, a Kirk Cousins, a new center, an Allen Robinson or a Jarvis Landry type of receiver, maybe another tight end, and maybe a running back like Jeremy Hill, who will be available in free agency, you could pound the ball with a yard to go. I think this could be an average to above average offense. And this was a guy who was only in his first year, so it's not like he was I believe he was a coordinator earlier in his career. I forget with who, Glenn. I think it was just 1 year. But regardless, a very young offensive coordinator, a young mind in the game, a guy who could have grown. It's not like a guy like Norv Turner, who's been in the league for 17,000 years. He has to grow like everybody else has to grow. So I liked him. I thought it was a mistake that they fired him. Now, if, like you said, and I said before, if the coaches were rubbing the wrong way with him, players didn't like him, they were having arguments, yes, Bowles is the coach. He makes the final decision. But I think X's and O's wise on the field, this is a mistake. Glenn and the other coaches. And anything else you want to talk about before we move on to the next firing? Because you have more info on that firing than I do.
No, I mean, that pretty much covers it. Like I said, I thought he did some good things. I think that with, as with any coordinator with better players, we would have had better results. You bring in a Kirk Cousins, that makes a huge difference from working with Josh McCown and Bryce Petty. But again, if you're not going to listen to your boss, you're not going to be around long.
Yeah.
So he's gone. And now, as you said, more news. Steve Marshall, O-line coach, is gone. He's a guy who's been in the league for 10 years. He's been involved with some of the worst O-lines in the NFL. He was in, where was it, Houston for a little while. I think he was there with David Carr when David Carr used to get sacked 300 times a year. Appeared to do a good enough job the first couple seasons, but as, we talked about to the point that it just got
nauseating.
That's exactly what I was going to do, nauseating to talk about. But as I said a few times now, again, we've covered Brian Winters, the torn abdomen, that explains a little bit. But James Carpenter and even Wesley Johnson to a degree. Wesley Johnson, as bad as he was this year, he was a far better player last year. He wasn't great, but he was competent. And he was the exact opposite of competent this year. So when you have two guys up front like that, they take enormous steps backward. You can't not at least look at firing the guy. And I think Steve Marshall is somebody, if he had a stronger resume, maybe he gets another year. But he hasn't done a ton. He's done a good job, if you want to be generous. But this past season, they were so bad that you couldn't ignore it. So whether or not you like the John Morton firing, I don't see how you could be against letting Steve Marshall go at this point.
Yeah, and even guys like like everybody regressed. Carpenter regressed. Wesley Johnson, and competent. Say competent if you want to, but he was competent enough where the Jets felt like they can give him another contract and go into the season with him as their center. Brian Winters, a guy who I think is barely average even when he is healthy. Obviously, his health and his lack of health showed up this year, but even with the lack of health, he was still dismissing assignments at times as well. Even the backup guys, Jonathan Harrison looked like shit when he came in. Ben Ajalana, when he came in as an extra offensive lineman, just looked lost at times. So the offensive line regressed in a whole bunch of different aspects, and he got fired for it. And I'm not going to come out here and say, oh, well, I like John Dickinson from Maryland, their offensive line coach, has done a good job. I don't know a whole bunch of offensive line candidates. When the Jets hire one, we'll research, we'll tell you, but I don't have a list of offensive line candidates. Glenn, I don't think you do necessarily either. Now,
I do not.
Yeah, with John Morton too. I forgot what I was going to say, but now apparently they're going to hire Jeremy Bates as the offensive coordinator. We saw from some bigger guys, Adam Schefter's and whoever else reported that the Jets will be hiring him. What are your thoughts on this? And this is a guy, too, who was out of football for 4 years, hiked whatever trail he did. Apparently, the Jets wanted to hire him as an offensive coordinator last year, talked to him about it, but he was non-committal about it because he was not sure if he was wanting to stick around in football for a while. But what are your thoughts on that, on hiring Jeremy Bates?
It's one of those things that, as with any move, you have to wait and see how it pans out. But on the surface, I don't like it. I don't like the fact that there were more qualified guys available. We know that, Haley just got let go by Pittsburgh. As I said to you before we kicked off, that's like remember the time Rex Ryan fired his offensive coordinator when the Bills lost the game like 42-35? Like Rex Ryan's defense got blown out, and he fired the offensive coordinator. And now you see Haley, his the Steelers lose a playoff game, was it 45-43 or whatever it was, and they fire the offensive coordinator. That guy's had some great years. With some, he's had some bad years, but everybody does. But he's got a far more impressive resume than Bates, who's spent one season as an offensive coordinator with the Seahawks back in, I think it was 2009. In 2010. That season, Marshawn Lynch, his starting running back, and Matt Hasselbeck, his starting quarterback, both had the worst seasons of their careers. I want to say they finished 23rd in the NFL in scoring. Hasselbeck tied his career high with 17 interceptions, threw a career low 12 touchdowns in seasons where he started at least 14 games. And Marshawn Lynch averaged a career low 3.5 yards a carry. And you bring this guy in. Darrell Bevel just got fired by Seattle. I know he made the single worst call in the history of the NFL, but he's still got a more impressive resume. Especially, you're looking at these Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson comparisons. You got a chance to get Baker Mayfield, and the coordinator who's worked with Russell Wilson all this time is available, and you promote a guy who has 1 year, who you had to check with him to see if he wanted the job. Like, some people want these jobs so badly that you don't have to, double check and see if they're interested. So this, to me, I try not to be too skeptical, but to me it reeks of, is Todd Bowles looking at Todd Haley and saying, I'm a defensive genius and I keep blowing leads and my defense keeps getting its doors blown off. If I bring this guy in and the offense looks, outperforms my defense, he's got head coaching experience, I might be hiring my replacement. I think that has to go into the thought process, because why else would you not look for an experienced guy? I mean, I know you got a 2-year extension, but you're still not really, in a way, Todd Bowles and Mike McCagnon, it's not like they're entrenched now and they're safe for the next 2, 3, 4 years. They're still, doing their jobs to save their jobs. You would think Todd Bowles would say, I need the best guy I can get who's shown he can do this. And instead he brings in Jeremy Bates, who might be great. I don't know. I mean, 1 year, to be fair to Bates, 1 year is far from enough to decide whether or not a guy can do it. But the 1 year he did have, the results weren't impressive. And a lot of guys, like I said, with much, much more impressive resumes, didn't even get an interview.
Yeah, honestly, I would have just liked to have kept Morton. And I was going to say before, Glenn, and yeah, there were some bad games like versus the Broncos or versus Tampa Bay, but a lot of those games that the Jets won was because of their offense. Like, they were put up 38, 37 points. Even if you just compare, like you said, Kirk Cousins, even if you don't even consider the money in free agency, I know it's kind of hard to say, like, what if game, but the Jets, if they had Kirk Cousins this year, could have easily had 7 or 8 wins. And that's you consider it the Miami game, the Patriots game, maybe even like the Bucs game where their offense just couldn't get over the hump. So I like the offense. A lot of people say he's easily replaceable, but I would like to see. I don't think a lot of people are going to do better than he did with the lack of talent that he had. It's easy to pull up numbers and say numbers. Oh, well, numbers this, numbers that. He had this 27th. Look at what he was working with. Josh McCown in one of the worst offensive lines in the entire league, and I know that we're pretty high on not pretty high on him. We're relatively high on Josh McCown, but still, it's just there's not a lot of talent on this team. It's not like the defense was holding guys off, or the offense didn't really kind of have to like put the team on their back at times, which they did. So I don't like it. I wouldn't like Bevel or whatever from the Seahawks either. I just watched too many games, and there's a lot left to be desired. But I would rather have him than Jeremy Bates. The guy I said on the Turn on Jets podcast when I was on there was Todd Haley, and because Todd Haley, listen, yeah, he has great talent, but he's also a proponent of developing that talent with guys like Brown and Martavis Bryant and Bell. So he helps develop these guys. He helps them put them in good positions to succeed. He's done that a lot over the last couple of years. I think he was hired in 2012 with them, the Kansas City Chiefs' old head coach. So I would have rather have had Haley. Now, am I saying that Bates is going to be a bad offense coordinator? No, not necessarily. If you look at his resume, okay, you said that about Hasselbeck, but McCown set career highs with the Jets in completion percentage, 63%, passing yards, 2,926, passing touchdowns, 18, rushing touchdowns, 5. Next season will be his 10th coaching. He was the Bears QB coach in 2012, Seahawks offensive coordinator in 2010, Broncos QB coach in 2008, the wide receivers coach and the quarterbacks coach in 2007 for the Broncos, offensive assistant in 2006 for the Broncos, Jets quarterback coach in 2005, assistant QB coach for the Bucs in 2004, Bucs offensive quality control coach 2002 to 2003. Apparently, he's a disciple of Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan's the same type of guy that Jeremy Bates is with the West Coast offense zone blocking scheme, so you're not going to see much of a change there. Now, will you see a change, okay, where Morton like to run a lot more sail, where maybe Bates will run a lot more levels? You never know. That's you have to wait to see on film for that.
Right. Yeah, we have no idea.
But the same type of system, the same type of terminology, the same type of zone blocking scheme, where obviously zone blocking scheme, it's not 100% zone blocking. You're probably still going to see at least 25% power and man blocking type of stuff. Matt Hasselbeck was asked, I guess by Rich Cimini, and Matt Hasselbeck said that 2008 Mike Shanahan offense with the Broncos in 2008 is exactly what Jeremy Bates will run. So I have to look a little bit more into that maybe. But that offense was ranked number 2 in the league. So you never know, Glenn, but at the same time, when you have a guy in Morton around, I would rather have kept him, like I said, Todd Haley too. But I guess we'll see how it works out with him. But the Jets better get this freaking right, because regardless of what's happening or what you think of the offensive coordinator, the Jets quarterback will be here next year. Whoever it is for the next couple of years, it will be this year. Because like you said with Mike McCagnon, with Todd-Bowles, regardless of the stupid contract extensions, it's just kind of like saving face. If they I'm not going to say the F word, but if they screw up this year, they're gone. They can't. And that's what, like, people get into. I already hear people saying, what does the Jets' record have to be for these guys to save their jobs? It's so ridiculous to even discuss that, because if they go out and they get a Baker Mayfield or a Josh Rosen or whatever they do, and this team, say you start off 2-6, and then you win 7 of your last 8, like, you're 8-8, but guess what? Like, you're heading in the right direction in a huge way. And sometimes a lot of people will say that front offices that are on the hot seat will draft a young guy because it buys them a couple of years sometimes. Ownership will give them a little more leeway if a young quarterback is taking a year or two to come along. I don't have a huge problem with that. The thing is, get a damn quarterback in here. They're going to do that. It's just a matter of who it's going to be. And I know it's going to be a little while, maybe a couple more weeks at least, till we start talking draft. But while we're talking about Haley, I think big thing you can't ignore with him is look at the success he just had in Pittsburgh, and look at who his quarterback was. A big mobile quarterback with a big arm, kind of like Josh Allen. Glenn, I'm telling you right now, if they draft Josh Allen, we're not doing a show anymore. I'm not even kidding. I'm not gonna be able to deal with it. So that's the end of that.
Who?
Josh Allen. If the Jets draft Josh Allen,
no, I'm saying Cleveland.
Oh, please, God, take him number one.
Todd Haley is in Cleveland now, and they have the top pick. And there have been comparisons, Josh Allen to Ben Roethlisberger when he was in college.
Why? Because he's big and he has an arm. Dude, Josh Allen is going to be terrible.
Huge and mobile. There's not a lot of huge guys. Right, I get that, but you can't find an evaluator who's not saying this guy's a top 10 pick. And now the fact that you can find,
I can find a lot of them, honestly. From Jeff.
I mean, maybe Twitter fans, but like I'm talking like the Kuipers and the Matt Millers and these guys are saying that this guy's a top 10 pick. And now there's people saying that the guys in place in Cleveland like him, and Todd Haley had a guy who just came from a team where he had a big, mobile, strong arm quarterback. So that would
take him, please, because if the Jets take him at 6, I'm going to lose it, because I've watched. I think
they can't.
I think I've only watched 2 of his games.
They can't.
I've never seen he makes terrible decisions. He throws easy interceptions. He misses wide open throws. Where he might have a beautiful throw and has beautiful footwork.
The Jets are not taking him. You cannot take him.
If they take him when their job is on the line and they have to develop him,
exactly. You can't take another guy who's completing 50% of his passes. You just can't. They did it once with Hack. It blew up in their faces. That's why you got to get a guy like Mayfield, somebody with an accurate thrower, get an accurate passer, and
or you just get Kirk Cousins. You don't have to worry about any of this shit. That's what we want.
Ideal. I mean, that's I've made it clear that's my top choice, but I really think the John Elway thing is gonna sway. The same way Peyton Manning was wooed by a Hall of Fame quarterback GM. But
the Broncos only have like $28 million in cap space right now, and that's before they even sign their own free agents. So I don't know if we have enough space.
You know how that works nowadays. You cut 2 or 3 guys, you rework 2 or 3 contracts, boom, there's another $25 million in cap space.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see with Kirk Cousins, but the Jets, like I said, they better walk away with either Kirk Cousins or a guy like a Tyrod Taylor or Case Keenum and a first round quarterback, whether they be Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold, or Josh Rosen. If they walk out with Allen, I'm going to lose it, because I've never seen anything good from Allen. I've only watched 2 or 3 games, and I'll admit that, because I don't have his film yet. I'm going to try to get it, but there's nothing that impresses me. Yeah, he's big and he can throw. Wow, that's great. I know a lot of guys who are big and who can throw. Doesn't mean you can play in the NFL. And when you're in a Division II school, you're supposed to dominate your opponents. That's what you want to see. Division II, Division III. When we see that many times, you want to see them stand out on film and dominate and rise above their competition. And he does not do that. When you're completing 50-something% of your passage against Division II schools, what are you going to do in the NFL? He's not going to be a good player. He's reminds me like a Paxton Lynch type of prospect with a bigger arm, but he's a guy who got drafted because of his running ability in his arm. So
hopefully Denver likes him at 5. Denver asked for him and Baker Mayfield. Denver requested them for the Senior Bowl because they have their staff there. They said these are the quarterbacks we want on our team, so they get an extended look at both of them now.
Okay, well,
and that's again, John Elway, big arm mobile quarterback. Does he see himself in Josh Allen?
We're going to dive more into the quarterbacks when April rolls around because it is January, and I'm already starting to see mock drafts, and this guy visited that guy, and this. I'm like, yeah. I do not care right now. There's nothing. There's not one source right now, whether it be a Matt Miller, a Rich Cimini, a whoever, Mel Kiper. All those guys are guessing, and he met with a guy? Yeah, they meet with 5,000 prospects. Who the hell cares?
They meet with everybody.
I don't care. We're not talking about it. We're not going to dive into oh my God, the Jets met with Baker Mayfield. The Jets are drafting Mayfield. Like we're not one of those shows. If you listen to one of those shows, I don't know why you do it, but you're stupid. So I'm sorry. It means nothing. If I've done a show for 3 years, Glenn. If this show's told me anything, do not look into the draft before the day before the draft. There's just no point. So we did Morton. We talked about Jeremy Bates, some of the other guys we'd have liked more. We'll see what his offense brings. It's hard to really judge. Like I said, we know we'll see the West Coast offense, more short dink and dunk with some deep shots down the field, the zone blocking type of thing. Steve Marshall got fired, the offensive line coach. We'll dive into who they hire. When they hire him, we're not going to do a whole 45-minute segment on offensive line coaches. I don't know what they implement, or do they like a bucket step more than 45-degree step? I don't know, which we'll see. But let's look at the roster, Glenn. We're going to look at the roster, I guess, kind of just in general. We'll go through the positions, then we'll talk about some of the guys who were drafted last year. We'll talk about their rookie seasons and what we thought of it. So I guess we'll start off with quarterbacks and kind of our outlook for the guys who played in 2017 and 2018. Josh McCown, is this a guy that you expect to be back in 2018?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't surprise anybody. They, whether they get a Kirk Cousins or you draft a Baker Mayfield or Josh Rosen, you obviously you're still going to need some depth, and you're going to want an experienced backup. Especially if you're looking to be competitive early on. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. I know I saw today Rich Cimini said that McCown had been non-committal previously, but now he's saying he'd like to come back next year. He'd like to come back for the Jets. I think he knows, I think he knew this year when he came that he was, that they were going to give a guy like Hack an opportunity to take that job. And we saw how much playing time Hack got in the preseason. They wanted him to win it. He was just terrible, so he didn't. But I think he'd be happy to come back in a backup role, and you could do a lot worse, really.
Yeah, we had 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this year, Glenn, with, like I said, a lack of talent on the team. So a guy who's a backup, yeah, I could live with it. But even McCown coming back, like let's say if the Jets draft Mayfield or Lamar Jackson or whoever it is, quarterback A, B, C, D, I wouldn't necessarily prefer McCown. I would like a guy like Case Keenum, a guy who's a little bit younger, who maybe could be your starter for a couple of years, maybe a Teddy Bridgewater, maybe a Tyrod Taylor, who'd probably be up there in my options. And I'm not saying that, would I love Case Keenum to be the starter for 1, 2, 3 years? No, not necessarily, but I think he'd be a better option than Josh McCown because he has the potential to be a starter for a couple of years. Even though it's not ideal for me, I would like a guy in the first round to play well, or Kirk Cousins. But so there's a couple of guys I prefer over McCown, but worst case scenario, I would be okay with him coming back. Like I said, there's definitely guys I prefer over him: Tyrod Taylor, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, and a couple more guys. But we'll see. Maybe as a quarterbacks coach or whatever it may be. But he played good this year, so we'll see. He's a journeyman quarterback. He made some bad plays. He made some good plays. He made some bad plays like this one, throwing into a cover one with a safety over top of a 9 route and just throwing it right to him. So he's still not a great quarterback, but still. Bryce Petty, Glenn, Christian Hackenberg, these are two guys who we're either expecting one of them to be cut as a, maybe they'll come back as a 3rd or 4th stringer. I know you said you'd be okay with keeping 4 guys. I'm not necessarily. I'd rather keep 3 because I think they're both garbage anyway. So I think one of these guys are going to be back. Probably going to be Petty. I think Hack is going to be here for 2 years and be cut because he's just that bad. He's that bad of a draft pick. But there's not much of a more outlook for those guys unless you want to add anything. You want to move on to running backs, Glenn?
No, I mean, some of the names you mentioned, Case Keenum obviously had a big year. It's going to be interesting to see what he's able to command on the open market. I wouldn't mind Teddy Bridgewater or Tyrod Taylor. I think with Teddy Bridgewater, he's another one. Like, how much can he command? Even though the Vikings played well his first couple seasons, he wasn't great. He was good.
Yeah.
But, I don't think he was good enough that you'd say he's going to command big money. And I think those are all guys that, as you said earlier, and I've said previously, I'd have no issue if they signed one of those guys and took a quarterback at 6. I think the only guy that I maybe wouldn't take a quarterback at 6 would be Cousins. I think if you get Kirk Cousins, you have a bona fide starter for 5 years. If they did do that, I honestly wouldn't hate that either. Because if that guy develops, I mean, we've seen what happens. If Kirk Cousins, continues to play as well as he does, and you draft a guy behind him who can play well, that you can trade one of those guys for a couple first-round picks and have a quarterback. So I wouldn't hate it, but it would surprise me because of the money it's going to take to bring him in. I think if you bring in Kirk Cousins, you then draft a left tackle or an edge guy or, something like that. But yeah.
Chubb. Give me Chubb.
The more I see it, the more I think about it, I wouldn't be shocked if he went to Indy at 3, if Indy doesn't trade down. Because they need playmakers. And their defense has been so bad for so long.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie to you, say I even watched really film on anybody more than like the top couple of guys or have seen film. But the thing with the free agency, and we'll get into in coming weeks, we'll talk about free agents and stuff like that. But a lot of people will just kind of see Ezekiel Ansah and DeMarcus Lawrence. Yeah, we want those guys. People forget to realize that you need scheme fits. They're 4-3 defensive ends. They're 260, 270, 275. Can they fit as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 guy who's going to be a 9 tech? A lot of the times in the Jets defense, guys like who are 9 techs are guys like a Khalil Mack or a guy like a Von Miller who are 250. You need speed to play off the edge in a 3-4, so you can play. Yeah, it's easy to plug in Ezekiel Ansah. He's a 4-3 defensive end. You don't know if he can transition into that, so you're going to give a guy a bunch of money.
How big is he? I feel like he's too big.
Ezekiel Ansah is 275. That's the last I looked.
Okay, I thought he was bigger than that. I thought he was like a 285, 290 guy.
Yeah, but even if 275, Glenn, that's a massive outside linebacker on the 3-4 from a 9 tech. Because 9 tech, you need so much. You're covering more ground, so you need a lot more speed to get to the quarterback. We're not a 4-3 defense. Yeah, the Jets do line up in a 4-3, a 4-4, 4-2 a lot of the times, but or not a lot of times, a decent amount of times, but still, he's not a 3-4 defensive end. So I'm not or outside linebacker. So I'm not sure how to handle that because the guy that they're going to use, going to be on the weak side. You have a strong side guy in Jordan Jenkins who's going to play tight 5 tech and who's going to command the edge and set the edge and stop the runs. But the Jets don't need a guy like that. The Jets need a weak side pass rusher. And I don't think that's those guys. So that's why I always kind of plug in Chubb at 6 if the Jets want to go that, if he falls that far. But yeah, if the Jets do get a Kirk Cousins, first round's a little bit too high for me. I'd like to see one of those premium positions drafted, the cornerback, offensive tackle, outside linebacker.
That's as much as I've defended Mike McCagnon, because I have. The roster is bad, but the cupboard is bare at the premier positions. And you have an opportunity now to address at least 3 of them, if not 4, through the draft with the money you have in free agency and having 3 picks in the top 50. There better be a tackle, there better be a corner, you better get a pass rusher, and of course a quarterback. You've got to be able to find at least a couple of those guys.
And a center is an absolute need. I'm not going to call that a premium position.
Oh yeah, absolutely need, but not premier. And there's 2 or 3 guys I'd be happy with in free agency. But I'd also like
Broncos guy, Jensen. There's another 2 guys who ranked out pretty well. Who we'll dive a little bit deeper into one of those shows when we actually look at them. But Glenn, let's get into running backs. Powell's going to be here under contract next year. And there's some people who want to trade him. I'm not necessarily saying I would or wouldn't. If they do, I'll be okay with it. McGuire's going to be here. Now, I think the Jets do cut Forte. If they cut Forte, they're going to have $1 million in dead money and save $3 million. I think they do that. I think they bring in a guy. Like I said, we're not going to get too much into free agents, but I like to see them bring in a bruiser. You've been calling it for multiple years or months at this point, Glenn. Maybe a guy like a Jeremy Hill from the Bengals came out of LSU, who's a kind of a bruiser type of back. But I think the Jets do get rid of Forte, and I think that it's McGuire, it's McGuire, Powell, and another guy, whether it be, drafts from the, 3rd to 7th round or a guy like a Jeremy Hill in free agency. But I do think Forte is gone. We've said it on Forte that we think he's better than people think he is because people look at stats and look at his yards per carry, say how bad he is, but he was okay this year. He found some holes. But at this point, he's older, and I'd rather give some time to a younger guy they sign in free agency or that they find in the draft. So,
yeah, absolutely. As you said, I've been talking about it for a while now. There's got to be a bigger guy in there, and we talked about it during the season. Matt Forte outperformed both our expectations, a lot of people's expectations, just in terms of what he was able to do. The stats weren't there, but when you watched him on film, he was able to do a lot of things that people thought he couldn't do anymore. No, he's not the same player he once was, but he was still, if the blocking was there, he would have been absolutely fine. The blocking wasn't there, so the numbers weren't there. But at his age, any minute now he's going to fall off a cliff. And
exactly,
in all likelihood, that's next year. You're rebuilding for the future. Guy had a great career, high character guy, tough guy not to root for. But I think it's safe to say he's gone, and I hope he does well wherever he goes next.
Yeah, like I said, we're not going to get too much into free agency, but I think a guy like Jeremy Hill would fit well here. The Jets do need that bruiser type of guy. And you think Powell's back here next year as well?
Absolutely. I think that even though he's knocking on the door at 30, I've been saying for a few years now, 3 or 4 years, that this is a guy that you won't have to worry about him the way you do other guys when they reach 30 because he's had low reps in the NFL. If you look at his carries in college, he didn't get the ball a whole lot in Louisville, and he's one of those guys who doesn't take a lot of big shots. So he's probably, even though he's knocking on 30, he's probably got the tread of a 27, 28-year-old. I think he's got at least 2 good years left in him.
Yeah, and he's a high character freaking guy too. You never hear any problems with Powell.
Yep.
And that's like we did it that like pound for pound toughest guy on the team. Powell's up there too. Powell.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Every time I go back and watch him from previous seasons, the way he breaks he doesn't run people over, but he's a tough guy to bring down. And by NFL standards, he shouldn't be. He's not a bruising back, but he's such a good player, man. I wish they would have given him more opportunities throughout his career, but hopefully they do something decent before he hangs him up.
Yeah, and okay, so we'll move on to tight ends, Glenn. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, what do you think about that situation? Sterling is a guy who, I'm not going to get too much into backups. I thought Sterling was okay when he was here. He was a decent blocker. Same thing with Tomlinson, decent blocker, had a few plays earlier in the year, and then he kind of got phased out towards the end of the year for a guy like Sterling. So I think they prefer Sterling over him. So probably next year looking at Sterling, Leggett, and then whoever it may be, whether the Jets sign a guy in free agency or re-sign Austin Seferian-Jenkins. We've said it before, and I'm not going to speak for Glenn. I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins is an average at best tight end in this league at least right now. Don't hype him up like a Pro Bowler because he's not that. But if he's looking for $6-7 million right in that like kind of average range, I'm fine with paying him. But if he's a guy who's looking for $8, $9, $10 million a year, don't let the door hit you in your ass on the way out. He's just not that good of a player. So $6-7 million for a couple of years, I'm fine with that. But anything more than that, Glenn, I'm not stretching too far out for Austin Seferian-Jenkins.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. What was that? There was basically a report recently that the Jets offered him 2 years, $8 million, and I have a hard time. We talked about this. We talked about it with Kyle Smith, and we said, he's one of those guys in the $6 million range or whatever, and that's what he's looking for. But the more, he really, really disappeared late in the season. And I know I've talked about, the possibility that maybe it was because of the fact that this is by far the most reps he'd played in the pro season. He'd never really been an every down guy. He'd never been a full season guy. Maybe that took a toll. But I look at him and I think you could probably get similar production from a few different guys. He was far from great. I think early on, a lot of Jets fans, myself included, especially when he was scoring touchdowns, it was exciting to have a tight end actually catching a football, even more so to have one that was catching touchdowns.
Yeah, even in this game, Glenn, he dropped 2 touchdowns. So
yeah, I know. And you felt like, like I said, I fell into that trap too. Let's get this guy re-signed. Let's not mess around. We finally have a tight end. But then you let the season play out, and it's kind of like, well, we have a tight end. Like a lot of teams have a tight end. It's just that we haven't had one for so long that you forget. It's nice to have one, but he's not a game breaker. He's not he didn't prove himself to be a playmaker, which he may become eventually. Who knows? But really, you look at his numbers down the stretch. He averaged like 3 catches and 30 yards a game over the final 7 or 8 games of the year without a touchdown. I mean, I know Bryce Petty's bad, and I know, Josh McCown was in there for a lot of those games too. And he was now, we'll find out in the future if it was the way he was being used, because as we saw in camp, and I think a little bit in the preseason, we saw him used down the field a little bit more. For whatever reason, once the season started, it was all quick, short, 4, 5, 6-yard routes, and not really giving him a chance to go down the field and make a play. Now, is that because he's not capable? We'll find out. But I'm looking at it already like, you know what? I wouldn't mind if they walked away from him at this point.
Yeah, the Panthers game I just put up, if you are watching on YouTube, like I said, just go to JetNation, subscribe. But he dropped a wide open fade and another fade. Argue with the NFL rulebook all you want. It was a drop. The ball slipped out of his hands when he was on the ground. It is what it is. Even on this play, he's just an average blocker. He's supposed to check and release. He lets this linebacker just cross his face, and he tries to come back and check him a little bit. Just doesn't really do anything effectively, and then he just comes in and allows a sack on McCown.
That was disappointing because early in the year it looked like his blocking was much improved, and it probably was because he was even worse last year. But it's still the consistency wasn't there, and we saw him get beat a lot. So would I mind if he came back at 2 years, $8 million? I guess not the end of the world if they give him 2 years, $10 million. But beyond that, I wouldn't increase the offer.
I think $6 million is like the highest. I would probably like to extend anywhere over that. I think it's a little bit crazy, and people might kill us for that, Glenn. But don't let a decent tight end or a decent season from a tight end cloud your judgment because the Jets have had such bad tight ends. It's not like tight ends are really that hard to find. There's a lot of them around the league who are pretty good, and people might say, well, then why couldn't the Jets? It's because the Jets just had their head in their ass for so many years that they just lacked so many basic things like a freaking tight end who can catch the ball. Austin Seferian-Jenkins was okay at getting open. He had nice size. He had nice extension, but he wasn't a stud athletically. He wasn't a great blocker. Now, like I said, I'd like to have him back for $5-6 million, but more than that, he's not a Pro Bowler. Those plays I put up of him dropping balls in the end zone, Pro Bowlers don't drop those balls. It is what it is. Like I said, just don't let your fandom cloud your judgment of how good the guy was. Now, should he have been used down the field more? Definitely. Could he have more yards because of that? Definitely, probably. But still, even if he wasn't getting open too much underneath. But okay, let's move on, Glenn. We talked about Sterling and Tomlinson. Leggett will be back, so we'll see. Wide receivers. Let's talk about Anderson now since we're getting into wide receivers. Arrested again, Glenn. And let me just pull up the article about exactly what it was. But he's arrested on 9 charges in Florida.
If you're going to read off the charges, should I just go take a nap and come back in about 25, 30 minutes?
I'm not going to do all of it. I'm just going to read a little bit of it, Glenn. But police report obtained by Rich Cimini. A car Anderson was driving was clocked at 105 and a 45, which is ridiculously fast. 60 miles per hour over the speed limit is ridiculous. That's like you killing somebody. He also ran multiple red lights. I believe it was 2. And when he was pulled over, Anderson apparently threatened to sexually assault the officer's wife. Now, and I watched the news, and they were like, he said he's going to rape the wife. He never said he's going to rape the wife, and if you have children, cover their ears. But he said he's going to fuck his wife and then come in her eye. So he never said he's going to rape her.
Joe, would you give the poor listeners 2 seconds to get to their kids?
Well,
if you have kids, cover their ears, fucker.
Sorry.
It was practically one word.
Sorry. Well, I hope you had quick reflexes.
My goodness.
Whatever.
Ears. Here it is.
I'm sure he doesn't know. They don't know what the keyword means.
Next time there is ear cover worthy material, count to 3.
Now, don't be a little biznatch. The kids have heard their dad curse in the car or something like that when he's yelling in traffic.
3.
Okay, whatever. I'm not in the whatever.
I'm sure we have some responsible parents that listen to the show.
So he was going to F the wife and C in her eye and make her a pirate. Yeah. Yes. So he didn't say he's going to rape the wife, but still, you're basically being a douche. You're being a piece
And
of crap.
I think he used the term nut.
Oh, whatever. So, whatever. I guess that's a little. I don't know. But still, you're being stupid. You're an NFL player. You have a great opportunity in front of you. You're only making $800,000 a year. You have the chance to make tens of millions of dollars, but you can't keep your own head out of your ass. Driving 105 and a 45, that's just ridiculous. And the reason that's, like I rather see like Sheldon going 143 on a parkway, because a parkway people can't really turn onto a parkway. And a 45 zone, that's like a residential area.
Yeah,
that's where a kid can run out for a ball. That's where somebody turns out from going 0 miles per hour, not on a park where you merge at 45, 50 miles per hour. So that's worse than Sheldon driving fast.
And now his lawyers come out and said he was driving so fast because he feared for his life.
Well, didn't the lawyers say that the cops were profiling him?
It's putting your life in jeopardy. I'm scared these people might hurt me, so I'm going to drive 105 miles an hour, which is super safe, and I would never get hurt.
Yeah, so, and I don't know if this is true or not, but the lawyer apparently said that Robby Anderson didn't make a sexual threat and that he was racially profiled. He wasn't racially profiled, but he's going through red lights and running away from the cops and driving 105 and a 45. So that's just beyond ridiculous. People will just
I feel like that's my biggest issue. One of my biggest issues with our legal system is that I know you're the lawyer and you're a douchebag if you do what these guys do, but you shouldn't be allowed to tell the story of what happened if you weren't there. Like, I hate when these lawyers come out and say, this is what happened. Listen, dude, are you going to testify as a witness or what?
No,
because you weren't there.
Apparently, the lawyer was in the car with the cop and said, "Oh my God, that guy's going 105 and a 45. If he was white, I wouldn't pull him over, but since he's black, whoop, 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 whoop." Like, no, he's an asshole who's doing 105 miles per hour and running red lights. Nobody's racially profiling you. You're driving like a dick. Sorry. I'm going to the police academy in a couple of actually next week, and next week is when we're going to start. And I apologize to the people who do this, but real life gets in the way. Starting next week, the show's going to be an hour max because my days are going to be looking like waking up at 3, get to the academy at 4:30 a.m. I get home at 5. I got to iron my stuff, shine my boots, and I go to bed at about 8 o'clock. So I have like 14-hour days to worry about. So the show's going to be about an hour long until probably May. Unless we have to do like a special weekend show if we have to cover something huge. But other than that, they're going to make an hour long. But I can tell you right now, no cop is racially profiling when guys driving 105 miles per hour. You can't even see into the car. But yeah, let's move on from that. The Jets aren't cutting him. He's the Jets' best offensive weapon. He's probably going to be suspended for a game or 2 or 4.
I mean, he got arrested at the concert earlier in the year. This is 2 altercations with law enforcement. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than 4, at least 4.
4. Okay, so we'll say 4 to 8, which is terrible because he's such a he's an amazing player, and he has the ability to be a guy who's getting 10-plus touchdowns with 1,000-plus yards every single year. But if he can't keep his own head out of his ass and make the excuse that he's 23, 24, I'm 24, and I understand we were raised differently, most likely, but still, dude, you have a chance to make millions of dollars. But if he screws up, he screws it up. He's going to be on the team next year. Suspension is probably definite. We'll see for how long. Other than that, the Jets have Jermaine Kearse, Chad Hansen, Stewart. And the Jets obviously have Quincy Nunwa. And I'm going to get in if we can, Glenn. We'll take a deeper dive into some of the Nunwa film I did in a little bit. But I would like to see the Jets add another receiver. Is it their first priority in free agency? No, it's not necessarily their first priority. But if they can get a guy like Dante Moncrief or an Allen Robinson or a Jarvis Landry for a decent amount of money and add another weapon to that group for a young guy coming in, or to entice a guy like a Kirk Cousins to come here, I would enjoy that. So I think that I would like to see the Jets, or I would definitely like to see the Jets add another guy to their wide receiver and core. So.
Yeah, as we've said, we're not going to start diving into the draft yet, but I'm looking closer myself now at wide receivers than I was before because it's a bigger need now than it was a few days ago. And depending on who you listen to, is it a deep class? I think there are some good mid-round guys that can be had because even though they need a receiver, they probably need to add a couple. I wouldn't add one before, late round 3 if you trade down, or round 4. There are too many issues that are bigger. And let's face it, we used to talk all the time. If you think back, the conversation, and still to a degree, was about how you can find really good running backs late in the draft. That's kind of become the case with receivers now because the league has become so pass-friendly. Some of the best receivers in the NFL are guys that were 5th, 6th, 7th round undrafted guys. Robby Anderson was undrafted. A lot of guys undrafted that, again, these pass-happy rules, you can get receivers really late. So even when you see these guys get taken, the last few years, these receivers get taken in round 1, 2, 3. A lot of them aren't much better than the guys you're getting later in the draft.
Yeah, I agree. It's a low need, but the Jets have thousands of staff members looking at the film in the offseason. If they like let's say like a guy like a Dante Moncrief who's not going to command a ton of money, they want to add him, and you add him to Quincy Enunwa and to Anderson and to Curse, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to just carve out a role for Hanson or Stewart. They have to earn it themselves, So it is what it is. But Glenn, like I said, let's I have way too many Quincy Enunwa film clips that I brought up here, but we'll move on. We'll talk about that in a little bit if we can, which we probably will because I did a whole review on it, so I'd like to bring up a little bit. The offensive line, Glenn, it's looking next year like most likely, unless they bring in a guy in the first or second round who they didn't want to develop, maybe they can start, but for the most part, it's going to be the same offensive line. Beacham's probably going to be your left tackle. If they cut him, they have $7 million in dead money and only $2.5 million in savings. So you have to kind of ask yourself, is Beacham worth $2.5 million? I think he is. He was an average left tackle in this league last year, at least in my opinion. Carpenter, left guard, 2.1 in dead, $4.7 million in savings. So you have to ask yourself with him too. Is he worth $4.7 million? In my opinion, he is. Do I think he's going to bounce back to the first 2 years of James Carpenter as a Jet? Probably not. But do I think he's going to bounce back? I do think he will. Wesley Johnson has no contract in 2018. He's not going to be on this team. He was absolutely terrible. Winters, if you cut him, it's $7 million in dead money and $0 saved. So Winters will be here as well next season. So it's not like you just get rid of him because you're just losing $7 million and not saving anything. And then Shell will most likely be your right tackle. For Shell, I would like to see them bring in somebody to compete with him. I'm not one of those guys who thinks he's going to be the long-term right tackle here. I think he's a slow kick slide. I don't think he has great athleticism in terms of his power, in terms of the run game. I think he's okay pass blocker, but run game leaves a lot to be desired, at least for me. So I like to see them bring in competition, but he's making little to no money, so he'll be here probably competing for a job. Maybe with that first-round guy, Glenn, if they draft whoever it may be in the top of the round one, he'll probably compete with Shell for that right tackle spot and then kick over to left tackle and Beacham move. So, but the offensive line for the most part, unless it's a new right tackle and a new center, I think left tackle, left guard, right guard are going to be the same going into 2018.
I think so, but one thing that crossed my mind in thinking about this recently was the fact that Kelvin Beacham used to be a right tackle, and if you're already paying him, and if you draft a left tackle early on, then do you have Kelvin Beacham compete for that spot on the right side? Not ideal because he's probably much like Shell, probably a better pass blocker than run blocker.
Oh, definitely.
But let's face it, if you're going to bring in Kirk Cousins, you're going to want a guy who can, keep him upright. And Beacham was good last year. He wasn't great, but he's a guy you can live with him out there. But if they decide that left tackle is a priority and they sign a Kirk Cousins, do you take a left tackle at 6? Or do you take a left tackle, with your first, second round pick? Whatever you do, if you bring one in, you don't necessarily have to cut Beacham. You can let him compete with Shell on the right side. Maybe, he's making a little too much probably to be a backup. But I think he hangs around and they find a role for him, whether it's on the left side or moving back to the right where Pittsburgh had him a couple years ago.
Yeah, he was a decent pass blocker, left a good amount to be desired in the run game. We didn't get a lot done in terms of movement, but even like Shell, like I said, like here, like you have leverage, or you're trying to pin this guy or this what is it? It's a 3 tech. And he's not able to pin him inside when he has position on him, and he just lets the three tech just shoot through the gap and tackle Powell in the backfield. He's not a very powerful guy, so I don't know if he's ever going to be a long-term right tackle, because the right tackle you want to be able to run more, because like I said, typically teams do run to the right side more because that's where they usually put their tight end. But we'll see. And I have a couple more plays. I've already showed these plays, Glenn, of our interior of our offensive line getting beat. But like I said, because you're only saving $4.7 million with Carpenter, I think he's worth that, and you're not going to just cut Brian Winters for literally $7 million of dead money and no savings. It would make no sense at all. Like I said, I think you're going to have a new starting right tackle. Actually, I'm not going to say that. Maybe a new starting right tackle. The only thing I will guarantee is a new center. So we will see with that. But it's just I wish some of these guys could be replaced this year. But, we have other things to worry about as well. And then moving on to the other side of the ball, Glenn, defensive line. I think McClendon is here. We've talked about McClendon many, many, many times. You're only saving $3.25 million, which I think he's definitely worth with $807. Yeah, you're only saving $3.22 million. And he's definitely worth it. He was absolutely fantastic this year.
Yeah, there's no reason to let him go.
Yeah. So he's here, Glenn. You're definitely not going to cut him, right?
Oh God, no. He's a damn good player. I think for his position, you see guys play into their mid-30s. I wouldn't mind seeing him get a 1 or 2 year extension at this point. As a matter of fact, I'd love to see that. I think he's earned it. I think he's played far better than anybody anticipated, and I'd like to see him get rewarded for it. He's just high character guy, high performer, and underappreciated. Even this play, look how quickly he penetrates from its 2-eye, and look how quick he gets into the backfield to tackle Landry. I shouldn't get as mad as I do, but when I see Jet fans say that, McClendon, he sucks, because fans, they go to the box score and they look at sacks. And if they don't see a bunch of sacks, they assume a guy sucks. Like, that dude is a difference maker on defense. Look at that. Come on. Yeah. And then with that, Glenn, Mike Pennell is going to be a free agency. Is he a guy you're looking to re-sign on this defensive line? I'd have no problem with it. I don't think he'll be asking a lot of money. I think, we talked about how well he played down the stretch after being – he was invisible he was invisible, but they weren't really playing him. Early in the year, he was playing kind of 8-12 snaps a game, so he wasn't getting a whole lot of run. He had the big penalty, of course, against Carolina that pissed a lot of people off. But after that, man, he really straightened himself out, and he played really good football down the stretch. So, the question then becomes, again, especially in the modern-day NFL, how many run-stuffing D linemen do you need? But if you're going to have a couple around, I wouldn't mind having him. Yeah, but to compensate for Wilkerson's absence, which he will be gone, we're not going to even talk about Wilkerson. He's not on this team anymore in my mind. We'll talk about him exactly when he gets cut and how much the Jets save. But other than that, he's not even a Jet. But at this point, even on this play with Pennell, you're a zero tech. The play side left guard and the center combo block you to give the center leverage to the play side. What does Pennell do? He sticks his arm in the center's chest pad and just drives him with one arm to the play side gap, and he disrupts the run for Lewis. Cuts it off. Look how freaking, dude, you have to be strong as hell. This is what I mean. Joe, this early in the year, I didn't do an article, but I started a thread on JetNation in the forums and saying, how is a guy as big as he is, and we saw him in camp, he's got arms. I think I saw Leberfeld say, and he said it. I think it was him, whoever it was, said the guy's got arms like fire hydrants. He should be the strongest guy on the team. And you look at him he should just be able to push people around like he does in this play right here. But he wasn't getting on the field. We weren't seeing it. And then once he got the rotation, we saw it. And that dude can play, man. So I would have no issue bringing him back. Yeah, and it's all dependent on what he wants. And like I said, you're gonna, in my opinion, the Jets are gonna sign a defensive end type role player. Maybe it's even a Coney Ely who you just re-sign and he plays more. And then you see McClendon as a 2-eye, 3-tech more, and then you see Pennell more in as a 0, as a 1. But I think they're both back next year, and I think they both play some more snaps or they get some more snaps because of Wilkerson's absence, because he's going to be off the team because he's a freaking bum. But both those guys should definitely be signed back here, and those are two guys who I bring up all the time as guys who are underrated. And now Coney Ely's another guy, Glenn, you think he should be re-signed? I think he should. Like I said, it's all dependent on money. We don't know what these guys are getting offered. We don't know what the Jets are looking at. We're talking in relative to okay, is it an acceptable cap number? Do you want him back? Coney Ely played really well when he was in the game. He got a ton of pass deflections. He broke some records for pass deflections in terms of his snap count
and he got pressure on the quarterback a good amount of the time. You know, he didn't get a ton of sacks, but he was there. He was getting there. So Coney Easley is definitely a guy who I would like to see re-sign as well.
Yeah, you know, high motor guy. He was disruptive from the outside, and a guy that you can probably get back without breaking the bank. You know, there's a few guys on this defense that, even though collectively they weren't great, they need one or two difference makers. But in terms of depth guys, you know, you look at Coney Ealy, David Bass comes to mind. I really like the season he had. I think he was a little underrated. So there's a few guys, with Ealy being one of them, that I'd love to see back as, you know, spot starters, depth guys. I mean, Ealy as a starter, he can start for you. But there's some good players on this defense that, you know, a lot of people don't realize. Yeah,
I'm gonna go through the list in a couple minutes, Glenn, like all of the actual like free agents, to make sure we cover all of our bases. But yeah, and then outside linebacker, looking at Jenkins, Martin, they'll both be back next year. Bass is a guy who we both want to re-sign, a guy who could be a role player for the Jets. He had a pretty good year for what he was asked. Now, Malden is a guy who's coming back from the IR. I'm not sure if a guy like Malden's going to be back here. At this point, I like Bass more than him, and I like Josh Morton better than him. Malden did absolutely nothing in his second year that really impressed me. Even his first year was just, you know, it was meh at best. Inside linebacker, Julian Stanford's a free agent. I don't care if he comes back or if he's here. It's whatever to me. He's a Jag at this point. Bruce Carter is also a guy who's a free agent. And inside linebacker is another Jag who could be easily replaced. Demario Davis is a free agent. Now, what are we looking at with Demario Davis, Glenn? Because other than him, you're looking at Darren Lee, who was bad in the beginning of the year. He had a stretch in the middle of the season where he looked like he was really improving. And then towards the end of the year, again, he really dipped back down in his production. He's a guy at this point in his career, you're hoping that he could be a average linebacker. I think we'd all take that, because at this point, I think he's a below average linebacker. He just looks completely lost in coverage. And at times in the run game, he gets bullied around because he's just not big enough. So you want to bring a guy like Demario Davis back, a guy who is a good blitzer. He's a good tackler. He's good at recognizing what the play side gap and where the running back is trying to go. Do I think he's going to be Demario Davis in 2017, 2018? No, probably not. He probably regresses back to what he is, and you probably see some more mistakes. But even at that point, I think he's a decent linebacker who I think should be re-signed if it is a reasonable cap number. Now, what is that reasonable cap number, Glenn?
I think it's going to be – I think you got to look at the year he had. You know, I'd say in the $8 million range. When you look at what those guys make, I'd say $7-8 million a year is where they'll end up with him if they end up re-signing him. I think it does have to be a high priority because, again, the Jets don't have a lot of guys on this team that played at the type of level that Demario Davis did. He's still young enough that there is no reason to expect he won't be able to continue playing at that level. You know, of course, originally drafted by the Jets and just did a really nice job for them. Emotional leader on defense and a guy that you know, there's never an issue with character. There's never an issue with effort. And this year the production was there. I don't think it was just a situation where, you know, sometimes you see a guy have a big year to get that payday, Mo Wilk. But I think he's just the guy has the there's never been a question about his effort and desire. But I think it all just came together for him this year. He's in the right role, you know, a similar role to where Cleveland moved him last year, where he played all right. But I think the Jets just had a better defensive front. Again, not in terms of getting to the quarterback, which is what a lot of people look at. But when you look at Leo and McClendon, guys like that up front, making life a little bit easier for Demario Davis, I think you got to bring him back. And I think it's, you know, in the $7-8 million range.
And I think it's going to be a little bit lower than that just because of his production in the past. I think like $7 million is I guess the hot, like, I'm not going to get too like picky, like $7-8 million. If they want to bring him back for that, I'm fine with it. I'm not going to lose it because the Jets do have $100 million in cap space or near it.
Yeah.
And you have a guy like this playing next to him, which you can't cover a freaking fullback coming out into the flat, you know, Darren Lee. So he's not impressive to me. But then also with Lee, you see plays where I'm going to bring up like this, where he sniffs out a screen and makes a tackle where he uses his athleticism, but he's just so damn inconsistent. So that's the scary thing with him. So I think bringing Demario Davis minus the first couple of games where he looked terrible. I don't know what happened to him after like week 3 or 4, but he looked like a new player, and I think he's a guy who the Jets definitely look to bring back and to grow with Darren Lee.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on, safety, Glenn, the Jets have Jamal Adams and Marcus May. Those are your two starters in 2018. That's pretty obvious. backups, Rontes Miles, is under contract, I believe, for 2018. He's a guy who I would like to see go. I just, other than special teams, I'm not impressed with him at all. Really in any aspect of his game. Now he plays okay in the run game, but you have guys like Lee and even Marcus May who could fill that role in the run game, where they're really impressive there. Terrence Brooks is a guy who's a free agent. Yeah, maybe you bring him back. Doug Middleton's a guy who I've openly said how much I like him coming out of college as an undrafted guy. He's a guy who I was really looking forward to playing. Unfortunately, he's had some injuries and things like that. So let's see what he can do when he comes back. But nothing too much with safeties, Glenn. We pretty much know if we have a big need at safety at 1 year after drafting 2 guys in the first or second round, there's probably a pretty freaking big problem in Florham Park. So cornerbacks, now it's the Morris Claiborne question. What are we looking at with him? Because listen, people who say he was a Pro Bowl type of guy in the beginning of the year, I think you're lying to yourself. End of the year, he really dipped off. What did he play? 12, 13 games, Glenn. So he did play a much higher percentage of games than he did in his previous years. So can you expect that next year? No, not necessarily. Was he a number 1 lockdown corner? No way. In my opinion, he's a guy who's a really, really good number 2, a bad number 1. That's why I think he has a bad number 1, a really good number 2. So pay him like that. So if you're looking at $7-8 million for him as well, a little bit of a raise from the $5 million I believe he made in 2017. You're gonna have some injury clauses in there. I would hope, but he's a guy who, if you're gonna pay him like a number 2, fine. If he wants number 1 money, I'm sorry, but there's too many guys in free agency, hopefully, who make it. A lot of people look at the free agency list and say, this guy, that guy, we're going to sign this guy. A lot of guys get tagged, a lot of guys get signed, but looking at guys like Kyle Fuller, who I like a lot, Rashad Breeland, Colvin or Kelvin, whatever his name is from the Colts, is getting some high praise. I haven't watched him in film, but he's coming out. You have Malcolm Butler, you have Tremaine Johnson. So I think the Jets would be smart to sign like two cornerbacks in free agency. Like if they bring in a guy like a Butler and Fuller, that's the type of free agency I'm looking at. Or you sign a Butler to be your number 1 and you re-sign Claiborne. But I think the Jets have to walk away with either signing a guy like Claiborne and then signing another number 1, number 2 guy, and then signing some role players as your backups, because the Jets going into next year, literally they have Buster Screen, who I think is going to get cut, and you have Roberts, Derek Jones, Jeremy Clark, and Rashad Robinson, I believe. Is he under contract, Glenn, next year?
Who's that?
Rashad Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, so Buster Screen, are you looking to bring him back? And then what are you looking at for Morris Claiborne? Buster Screen, $2.5 million in dead money, $6 million in cap savings if you cut him.
In a perfect world, I mean, addressing Claiborne first, I think that he's a guy, if you want to bring him back, that's fine, but you don't pay much more than what you paid this year, even though he started 15 games, but I think 1 game he left like in the first quarter. So he played, just over 14 games, but his history is such that you can't count on him. So if you're going to bring him back, it's got to be based on, give him some incentives based on playing time, and you can't have him be your number 1. If you want to have him as your number 2 and work him in there, that's fine. But you better, as you said, I like Fuller. I like the idea of bringing Kyle Fuller in. So you bring in a Fuller, you re-sign a Claiborne, and then you got to draft another corner and sign another sort of mid-level corner, and which brings you to Buster Screen. He's I think that, kind of like he wasn't along the lines of Darren Lee in terms of like he was good, then he sucked, and he was good. He was kind of week to week. He had a couple stretches where he was really good for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he was bad for a week or 2, and then he'd have another good I think we saw him at times this year play at the highest level we saw him play with the Jets. Like, he had some really good games.
Yeah.
And you look at him and you think, well, he's still not very good. But then you look at cornerback play around the league, and again, as I said earlier, with how you can get these productive receivers so late in the draft, because every friggin' rule favors the receiver. So Buster Screen isn't very good, but is it worth keeping a guy around if he can give you 8 good games a year or 10 good games a year? You don't want that, but it's like the O-line right now. Like, league-wide, it's so bad that you have to overpay even if a guy is okay. I would like to see Buster Screen get replaced, and if you would have told – before this season, if you would have told me he might be back next year, I would have said you were nuts. But I think he had enough good games And if the Jets were pressed against the cap, he'd be the first guy to go. But they could look at this and go, we got $100 million. We got him and Morris Claiborne. That's it. Just because sometimes he's good, we'll keep him around. So I'd say he's got about a 50-50 shot, whereas before the season I would have said he had about a 5% chance.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment that he's a 50-50 shot. Now, like you said, I'd like to see him replaced, no doubt about it. But it all depends on how free agency goes. If the Jets leave free agency with just a Malcolm Butler and they're not able to re-sign, a guy like a Morris Claiborne or able to replace Screen in the slot, then you can't just get rid of a guy. So he needs to be replaced before Jets do get rid of him. And all these positions, don't expect them to be, replaced this year. Not going to get a whole bunch of really good corners this year and a whole bunch of offensive linemen. This is a couple-year rebuild. The Jets cannot fix corner this year.
That's one of the reasons I was so disappointed that Xavier Coleman got hurt so quickly once he got called up to the 53, because he was a guy early in camp. I was hopeful he could be Buster Screen's eventual replacement in the slot. And would he play a game, 2 games, and then he gets hurt and he's out for the year. So who knows what they saw from him, behind the scenes.
Yeah. So we'll like I said, we'll see with Buster Screen if he's going to be replaced or not. But like I said, he has to be replaced before you cut him. You can't just cut him and not have anybody, because this year was his best year. And it's not like I like him a lot, but he's better than some other corners when you get out there, So let's just go through the list. Josh McCown, where he talked about that. We would like to see him resign in a worst case scenario, I guess. Morris Claiborne, pay him as a number 2. Wesley Johnson, get the hell out of here. Demario Davis, you said $7-8 million. I would say a little bit lower, but I'm fine with $7-8 million. Austin Safarian Jenkins, pay him like an average tight end. Mike Pennell, would like to see him resign. Chandler Catanzaro, I think he's a guy you bring back on a contract and let him compete, hopefully again with Ross Martin. But we'll see with that too. Coney Edley, we said we wanted him resigned. Jonathan Harrison's a bum, get rid of him. Bruce Carter, Jag. David Bass, re-sign him. Julian Stanford, Jag. Terrence Brooks, a Jag too. Let's be honest here. Chris Gregg, probably a guy who's going to get cut. Next and biggest guy, Dakota Dozier. Glenn, what do you do with Dakota Dozier? It's his contract year.
You give him a blank check, man. Whatever he wants.
Blank check. Okay.
Just bring him back, whatever it takes. No, I obviously I love the idea of bringing him back. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, and as we hear consistently from insiders and experts and analysts and ex-coaches, just O-linemen are not good nowadays, especially guys coming out of college, because everyone's coming from a spread offense and they don't know how to play in a pro system. The ball comes out in 1.2 seconds. They never have to block anybody for more than a couple seconds. Dakota Dozier's been up and down when he has had playing time purely as a depth guy. Yeah, sure, bring him back. Chris Gregg, I do. I again, talking about ASJ, especially if they let him walk. Without an established tight end, I would like to see him come back and get a legitimate chance to compete. And Terrence Brooks, in terms of, I think it comes down to him and Doug Middleton, for that backup free safety role.
Doug.
Yeah, I think Middleton will be back in the mix. Terrence Brooks back in the mix at safety. So I would like to see Terrence. I mean, I'd be fine if they brought Terrence Brooks back. Maybe they feel like they can draft somebody in the late rounds. You get a free agent who can be just as good or better. That's fine. But I like the idea of Dozier. Keep some depth there. Chris Gregg, I like bringing him back. Give him another look. And Brooks wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, Stanford, he can go. Bass, I'd really like to bring him back. And Bruce Carter, again, he's a special teamer. Plays a couple snaps. Yeah, I mean.
So, Glenn,
you could do worse, but you could do a lot better.
Yeah, so before we get into since we have some time here, I'm going to get into a couple of plays of the Quincy Nunwa film just to kind of see what we're getting back. We're not going to break it down like I did on Twitter, which, like I said, you can just go to our Twitters. I even said before, I'm at JoeRB31. You click on moments, and I put up every single play. I broke down the entire season, week 1 through 17. Doing Jamal Adams now. I did Robby Anderson's last year. I did Quincy Nunwa, so if you want to check that out. You can check Glenn out on Twitter at AceFan23. Puts a bunch of articles up for JetNation.com, which is obviously our website. But Glenn, we got a question from our good friend David O'Rourke, who says, so with the Jets looking to promote Bates to offensive coordinator and the Browns getting Haley as their OC, how do you think that impacts free agency and the draft plans for the Jets?
Well, see, this is the tricky thing. I don't think it impacts the approach because, again, the approach, first and foremost has to be getting a quarterback. But as I said earlier, I would have liked the idea of bringing in a guy who has had success with young quarterbacks, and that's not what they've done. So it won't change the plan, but it's going to be another strike against Todd-Bowles if they do draft a young quarterback and the guy doesn't develop, or if we don't see gradual improvement throughout the course of the season. Especially, I mean, let's say hypothetically the Jets grab Baker Mayfield and the Browns grab whoever they grab, and if the Browns quarterback under Haley plays great or shows a lot of improvement as the season progresses, while the Jets, whoever they end up with, stagnates or looks terrible, regardless of whether or not it's the offensive coordinator's fault, it's not going to look good for the Jets because you had an opportunity to interview some guys who have shown they can do it. You passed. You took a guy who spent 3 years out of the league, has 1 year as an offensive coordinator, and failed. So it's not a good look for the Jets if Bates falters and Bevel and I mean, Bevel hasn't been hired anywhere yet, but that doesn't mean he won't be. So we'll see. But it has the only thing that affects the Jets' draft plans is that they need a quarterback, and that's all it boils down to.
Yeah, I don't think it changes their plan. And with all these variables they talk about, Glenn, with getting a new staff, with Todd-bowles and Mike McCagnon and the whole Jets organization, can they coach up a young quarterback? So far, they've proven that they can't. With Hackenberg, I'm not going to tie them to Petty because he's a fourth-round pick. He's a shot in the dark. But you bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's a known commodity. You don't really have to do too much work with him. You don't have to develop him. He already is what he is. He's a top 10 to 12 quarterback in this league. So I think they'd be smart to really put all their chips in on Cousins because, like we said before, the Jets coaching staff and McCagnon could be fired after this year. You never know. They didn't get guaranteed contracts at 2020. So that's what I think. I think that Cousins is the smartest way to go. A lot of people are kind of, okay, if they get Haley, that means they're going to get a young quarterback. If they get Bates, they're going to get an old one. We don't really know what their plans are. People can take guesses as much as they want. We don't know what their plans are. We don't know how it affects them. We know that the Jets already have had their free agency meetings and that stuff. They're still probably going through them. I think they'd be smart to put all their chips in for Cousins. I think it'd be pretty stupid not to. But we don't really necessarily know how it affects them. But Glenn, I guess let's get into Quincy Enunwa too much. I don't know if I want to bring up all of these plays that I brought up of him, but I guess we could talk about Quincy Enunwa and kind of what he brings to the Jets. And watching the film, he literally does everything from a lead blocker on power plays to a split inside zone blocker to playing slot to playing Z to playing X to playing H-back, cutting the backside defensive ends to just literally everything. 2016, he had 58 receptions, 857 yards, 4 touchdowns. And on this play, like I said, doing everything. He's on a jet sweep, and then he trucks over whoever it is, defensive back. But he's just a freaking powerful guy, 225, a guy who could run the ball, a guy who's fast, a guy who's physical, a guy who's athletic. So he's truly a jack of all trades type of player.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say it was this last offseason. It must have been when we were talking about Quincy Enunwa and the value he brings. And I said that I don't know how many receivers there are in the NFL that can do what he does. And, he's not a household name, but when you see the way he plays the game, like his style.
Yeah, Glenn, like this play, like right here, he's lined up, out wide in a Twins formation, and he blocks. This is Vincent Ray. How many freaking wide receivers in this league can crack block a linebacker who's running full speed, and he steals them to the inside? He doesn't let him get to Forte here. Yeah, this is a linebacker. So
yeah, he does a really good job, good technique, turns him inside, and opens up the outside for the back. Now, of course, not a big game, but that's not on Enunwa.
No.
And yeah, I said it I said it last offseason when when we talked about his value and basically said that how many guys run a 4-4-5 that can line up at tight end, H-back, anywhere. Anywhere you want to put him as a receiver, he can do it. He can run a 4-4-5. He's not afraid to go over the middle. He can beat you deep. And he can knock the shit out of you as a blocker. So,
and he can do this as a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of my favorite players. And, yeah, the guy's just a player. And it's unfortunate that not only was he injured, but, as I've said before, a neck injury, man. You can't – I would love to see him come back and have a great career, but first and foremost, I want to see the guy have a happy life. So I don't want to see him come back and get a more serious injury with that neck. So I hope it all works out, obviously. But there's not a lot of guys you can look to do these things. Normally, if you find a receiver who's willing to block or who can block as well as he does, it's like a big plodding, 245 pound guy who's really a hybrid tight end. But Quincy he's a legit 4-4-5 guy, and he can knock the crap out of you too, and he's not afraid of contact.
Yeah, and the last play I brought up was there's a 9 route versus Gilmore where he caught it over his head, fingertip catch, really nice body control to keep himself in bounds, and on a deep over route over in the middle, tough catch in traffic, so he can go over the middle, catch tough balls. He can go down the sideline on 9 routes and catch tough balls. He could block, like on this play where I'll bring up, where he just blocks Cam Chancellor. Like, you're blocking linebackers, you're blocking Cam Chancellor. And it's not even like he's blocking him on the backside of the play. He's blocking him on the front side of the play, and Powell's able to cut around Chancellor, who's known as probably the most physical safety in the NFL, and Enunwa was able to lock him up on a play. So just super impressive. I want to keep bringing up a couple of more plays now in terms, and I will bring up some of his weaknesses on this play. What is this? This is a physical. You see him in the slot right here, and I don't know who he's running this route against. Nice physical route. Gets into the cornerback off the line of scrimmage, and then you can see, which is nice here, where he leans his body into the cornerback and then cuts off of leaning into the cornerback, which is giving himself some room on the out route, and they run a sail concept here. So the out route and the sail concept, or the corner route, whatever you want to call it. So he's able to run routes. Now, are his routes really crisp? No, because I'm going to bring up a couple of routes where he runs them pretty rounded. But like I said, just super, super physical dude. This is another really nice play, Glenn, that I found. I watched literally every single one of his snaps. Trucks freaking Earl Thomas over there. So,
yeah, I mean, there's really that I saw that play. I remember that play. I can't remember if you were there. I was at that game, and I saw when you posted that clip, and I instantly remembered it. And I mean, again, how many guys can do that? Not a lot. So, really, really hope that he's 100% and ready to go. And man, if not, that's going to hurt, because he's again, we talked earlier about Bilal Powell being a high character guy. Quincy Enunwa, to me, really high character guy. He had that shady accusation early in his rookie year where a woman said he did hit her or something like that. And police investigation, league investigation, all said nothing. There was no evidence of anything. But then, of course, Ray Rice knocked his wife out, so they went back and suspended anybody who was accused. So even after the league came out and said, we looked into it, we don't see any reason for discipline, then they were like, Ray Rice just almost killed his wife on video, so we got to go back and suspend Quincy Enunwa for that. But really, guys kept his nose clean, and nothing but, you hear nothing but great things from people who know the guy, from people that are close to him. So just really hope things work out for him.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a couple more plays here, Glenn. I'll do it quickly, but, this is what we worry about with the physicality here, being able to cut. I looked up this guy's weight. I think he's 280. But to be able to cut block a 280-pound defensive end on a play, that's just for a 220-pound or 225-pound wide receiver, just so many ways you can use this guy. Like I said, everywhere as a lead blocker, as a backside blocker, H-back, slot, X, Z, everything. And people are saying, well, he's easily replaceable. Glenn, is there anybody else in the NFL you could think of off the top of your head who is as useful as him as a utility player? I think the best comparison for him is Delaney Walker, where Delaney Walker does everything Now, Delaney Walker lines up as a Y tight end much, much more than Quincy Enunwa, where Quincy Enunwa will line up as a Z or an X a lot more than Delaney Walker, but a jack-of-all-trades player. I think that's the best comparison to him. And even on this play, Glenn, too, like where you see him, he cuts block 33, 33 gets back up because he lands on Quincy Enunwa, but look at the effort he does. This, you talk about high-character guys. He doesn't just lay on the ground and wait for the play to run by him. He gets back up and blocks 33 out of this play, which allows Powell to get another couple extra yards. Like, look at that freaking effort. That's impressive to me, man.
Yeah, and, one guy that – and I didn't realize this till recently. I forget someone posted a couple videos, and I came away really impressed, and it makes me wonder, in terms of free agency, at wide receiver. But Jarvis Landry is a receiver who, if you watch him on a regular basis, I don't watch him regularly, but when I saw this, I looked up a lot of his stuff. That dude lays people out too. Like,
yeah, him and Adams battled when they played. Battled.
Yeah, that was my thought when I watched him. I was like, this guy is the closest thing I've seen to Quincy Enunwa, in terms of his willingness and his ability to lay guys out as a blocker at wide receiver. So, if you had to, tell me, pick a guy who can do what Quincy does, Landry might be the next closest thing.
Yeah, and I talked about the 9 route too, and I'll just show you one more 9 route. So I messed up. Yeah, this is another play. This is one of his highlights from that year, Glenn. I'm sure you remember this game and this catch, just a 9 route catch, or 9 fade, whatever you want to call it, over Malcolm Butler. But another great body control, high points to the ball.
I had a fantastic view of that catch. I was end zone front row on that side of the field.
So you were back somewhere here or whatever.
I was actually behind the goalpost, so I had a good shot of that.
Yeah, that's just a ridiculous catch too. Just really good patience. Yeah. Now, in terms of what he's lacking, I'm not sure how much drops he had this year, but like this Browns game, I think this is probably like he made some great plays this game, but he also had 3 drops this game that I counted, and it's some concentration drops. Like here, it's just he runs a snag or a hitch or a comeback, whatever. I can't really see from this angle, but a lot of concentration drops, so he can definitely work on securing the ball, because he did have a decent amount of drops, more than I would like to see. And then something else too, that he doesn't really find the soft spot in zones very well. And something else he does too is he lacks crispness on his routes. Where like here from the slide, you can see how just rounded his route is here, where the cornerback is just easily able to stick it with him. Like he doesn't really have to give any effort. And the reason this is because he starts his cut off of his off the wrong foot, where if you're cutting to the inside, you want to start your cut off your outside foot, and he cuts inside off of his right foot going to the right. So some route running ability or some crispness that you would like to see, some technical things that he doesn't do too well, but there are some times that I brought up the route before we ran it beautifully. But yeah, route running drops are some areas he needs to work on. But other than that, just all around really, really fantastic player. And then I'm going to bring up.
Yeah, he was. I mean, and he was a raw prospect coming out of Nebraska. Run heavy offense where he still managed to put up some pretty impressive numbers. So I think it was always going to take him a little bit of time, but he has some plays. Yeah, I know. That's I remember. I think it was last off season when people just they look at the box score. Had people tell me, we don't have none of our receivers are fast, and I was like, this is because Robby Anderson was constantly getting underthrown, and Quincy Enunwa wasn't putting up big numbers. And I'm like, have you not watched these guys when the quarterback does play decent and gets the ball in their hands? Have you not watched these guys outrun defenders? And this is the type of stuff he does. That big play he had against New England in Week 17 a couple years ago. The guy, he does make plays if you get the ball in his hands.
Yeah, and that play versus the Ravens was I think it was a 69-yard touchdown. This play too, where he flashes some hands. This is probably his best play of the year, I thought. But it's just deep over route, Glenn, and that catch is just ridiculous. People remember versus the 49ers when that defensive back was going for the interception, and Enunwa just stuck his hand out there and stabbed the ball and took it away from number 29 here. Like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, we're pulling it up on the screen, but he flashed ability and everything, blocking, route running, catching. I said flashed ability or route running. So if you're saying, why did you say he's bad at it? he flashed ability in it. It's not the cleanest thing. He can work on it, but he has the ability to do every single thing. And the last one I want to bring up here too is probably another one of his best plays, but the yak ability with his powerful trunk and being 225, he can truck some people over. We saw him get truck over Earl Thomas. I saw him stiff arm Vernon Davis, who's one of the best tackling corners in the NFL. Here he breaks 1, 2, 3, 4 tackles to get into the end zone versus the Browns. Just I can't say how impressed I was with this guy watching all of his film and breaking it down. So like I said, if you want to go on my Twitter where I explain, 48 plays much more in depth than I just did here and, 5 minutes talking about it, you can. Joe RB31, like I said, and you could see a lot more of this, but I'm really, really excited to get this guy back, Glenn. Now, what do you think his contract looks like? Do the Jets have a lot of clauses in there? Do they re-sign him? Because I just don't think you could replace a guy like him. I think a coach sees a guy like Quincy Newton on film, and they're just dreaming about all the things they can do with that type of player. So for the people who say easily replaceable, just get rid of him, I think you're stupid because he does so many things like you just saw.
Yeah, and I think that, the biggest thing with him is going to be that I don't think he or his agents can expect much, in terms of money until he shows he can play, So I think you get him back for a pretty low number. No one's going to give him big money. Who's going to pay a guy huge money who's coming back from a broken neck? There's probably some teams that wouldn't even touch him. So I think you can get him back for a low number. I've heard people wonder, does he get a second round tender? I don't see a need for that. I mean, maybe he does, because really a second round tender isn't all that much. I don't have it in front of me, but
it's like $2.37 million.
I was going to say, I thought it was 2.1 or 2.2, but it's not much. So maybe you do that. Maybe you put a second round tender on him.
I would be safe with it. Why not? Wesley Johnson got a second round tender this year, right, Glenn? So let me just look up.
Yeah, exactly. So
let me look up at his charge was $2.7 million. So if you put a second round tender, $2.7 million on Quincy Nunwa, I'm fine with signing Nunwa for $2.7 million. Somebody signs him, you get a second round pick, I'm fine with that. But do not lose Quincy Nunwa because you're afraid of his injury. Hopefully everything medical checks out, but he's a jack of all trades type of player. Maybe he's a guy who only gets 800-900 yards with a couple touchdowns a year, but the stuff that goes I guess that goes without recognition is like the blocking that I showed, the cut blocking, the lead blocking, the crack
stuff
blocking.
That doesn't show up in the box score that most fans don't notice or don't pick up on. That really, he brings so much.
Yeah, so let's quickly go over, I guess, the rookies' seasons, Glenn. We've talked about it a lot. Adams, 6 pass deflections, a fumble recovery or forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 sacks. I would say overall, and I think going through the film now, like I said, on week 7, I'm really more impressed with him in coverage than I thought I was going to be. I thought he lived up to expectations, maybe slightly disappointing. I thought in times he got in trouble with his aggressiveness, whether try to be undercutting a block and letting a running back have an angle on him, or jumping into a pile too early instead of containing the edge where he messed up a little bit, or in coverage where he would try to he bit too hard on a double move, or he bit too hard on play action. I thought his aggressiveness kind of held him back at times, but I think coming into his second year, he'll learn to kind of hone back his aggressiveness and learn when to use it. So I thought he was really good. The ankle tackling absolutely has to stop with him, where he lets up a couple extra yards every time he tackles a running back. If he does get the tackle, there's plenty of times where he doesn't, where he doesn't, finish the tackle, where he doesn't finish the tackle. But even when he does finish the tackle, it's an extra yard or two for the running back that was picked up. So,
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something that it was a little surprising, for a guy that was as rated as highly as he was, and as much talk about what a refined player he was. We saw it early in preseason, and we thought, maybe that's something, cobwebs, or just getting used to the speed of the game. But a lot of ankle tackles, and it's one of those things where you can maybe kind of sort of get away with it for a little bit. But I'll tell you what, if this team ever comes around and could you imagine whiffing on an ankle tackle and letting the guy score a game-winning touchdown in a must-win game? It'll kind of be up there with the Marcus Williams missed tackle in Minnesota. The fans would be all over him for that, because really there's no reason for it. Especially if you're going against a scat back, a guy with quick feet, good agility, he sees you go for his feet. He sees you dive for his ankles. He's going to beat you.
Christian McCaffrey, I remember he was cutting through the C gap this year, and Adams over pursued because he was being too aggressive and dove at his ankles, and McCaffrey just jump cut him and just kept running up the field. So we saw that plenty of times.
Exactly. Those kind of things, they don't jump out as much when you're 5-11 because teams score and people go, oh, whatever, we suck. But if you're good and you're trying to win a big game and you're supposed to be this, sixth overall pick as a safety because you're an all-world player and you whiff on a dude because you dive at his ankles and he jumps over you.
Yeah, and even versus the Browns, like I said, I'll put that film review. It's going to be like 100 freaking plays, but versus the Browns, he tried to dive to tackle Isaiah Crowell around the knees, and he put his head down when he did it instead of kind of driving through his eyes, through the guy's hip or upper legs, and Crowell just stiff-armed him and kept running. So put his head down in ankle tackles too much. But like these are the plays I was talking about. Let me bring it up. Remember versus the Chiefs game where in coverage he has some good recognition at times, and on this play he almost jumps the dig over the middle and gets an interception. He's right here. So he definitely had some plays, and don't get us wrong with us criticizing him saying that he's not a really good player. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl player for many years.
Absolutely.
I just think that he has to learn to kind of chill out a little bit with his aggressiveness and stop ankle tackling. But like I said, he plays edge. He blitzes up the middle. He blitzes off the edge. He's a force player. He's an edge setter. He plays deep half coverage. He plays deep fourth coverage. He plays deep third coverage. He can play in cover 6. He can cover tight ends. He can play in short flat zones. He can play in hook zones. He literally did every single thing you could ask from anybody on the field this year other than play nose tackle or defensive end. So he was damn impressive. And like I said, on this play too, where I'll just talk about his aggressiveness, you see him right here on the top of the screen in man coverage on Kels, and he jumps on this is a sluggo, a slant and go, or as they call him, slant go or sluggo. He jumps on the slant portion of the route, and then Kels cuts up vertically and beats him bad. And I think the ball is deflected. Yeah, the ball is deflected by Pennell at the line of scrimmage. He didn't get beat here, so you won't see this on the stat sheet, but he did get beat badly here by 5 yards or so. So he has to work on some of that stuff, but overall, guy who's learning a lot of positions, Glenn, I think he's a Pro Bowl type of player. And so far, I'll say at least going through the film, I think I just went through his worst game, which was probably what game was it? I think it was New England or whatever it was. But yeah, so I was more impressed than I thought, at least through the first 7 games. But moving on, and sorry, Glenn, Kelsey. I always say Kels. I don't know.
I didn't know. I've never heard you say his name before, and I was like, did he just say Kels, like the book of Kels?
I don't know.
And,
I guess it is.
And then you said,
I guess it's Kelce. I just say Kels, but it's Kelsey. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I know it's Kelsey. Don't get on me, people. Don't hate me. I know it.
I'm just trying to step in and get an assist, like John Stockton.
I missed the dunk. But so moving on to Marcus May, what'd you think? 2 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, a forced fumble, 56 tackles.
Yeah, he had a really good year. I'm not going to lie, better than I thought he would. We'll see how he does in year 2. I think he's going to be the starter for the foreseeable future. A very good pick in the 2nd round. I think we may see him get beat deep a little more than we did this year, as teams start to challenge him down the field. Whether or not he does, we'll see. I'm not saying I want to see him get beat, just because. From what I saw from him in college, he got beat a little bit. He, did a really good job around the line of scrimmage. He did a nice job on, short area stuff inside the red zone. He looked outstanding. And he looked good, he looked good between the 20s too, but I feel like I saw him get beat on some bombs consistently enough that I thought I would see a lot of that his rookie year. We didn't.
Yeah.
We did see that one big play from Travis Kelce that comes to mind right away.
Yeah, Glenn, it's Kelsey.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Sorry. Travis Kelce. No, but really, very good year for him, forcing turnovers. And I'll tell you what, much bigger hitter than I thought he would be in the pros. We saw him lay the wood quite a few times. I was really impressed with that. So, you have to be excited as a Jets fan. Well, you don't have to be. I know some miserable Jets fans that are upset about every single move they make. It doesn't matter what they do. Some Jets fans they sit around and they just stare at the transactions, waiting for any move to be made so they can say that the Jets are idiots and they can't believe they just did that. But any Jets fan who's not a self-loathing maniac would have to like these moves.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I'm going to do a Marcus May review too. Marcus May, there was a game, he was a deep third, completely left his zone. The Saints, he could have got beat easily, but somebody else was beat for a touchdown even more easily. I think it was DeMario Davis in the flat, so they threw it to him. But overall, I was impressed. But he was deep. He was beat in coverage a little bit more than people think he was, and I will put that up. All the times that he was beat, I would say it was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9 touchdowns he could have allowed. But the quarterbacks, whether it be Blake Bortles or Brian Fitzpatrick, just weren't able to reach or hit the throw. Like even here, it's a cover 2, and he bites on the play action to the middle of the field, and Brandon Cooks is running wide open up the sideline, but Brady just can't hit him in stride, where this could have been an easy touchdown if Brandon Cooks didn't have to slow down. So Marcus May was a little bit more sketchy in coverage than people realized he was. Run game, beginning of the year, he was being too hesitant in the hole where he wouldn't close the gap. But then during the season, he progressively got better. He would be more aggressive into the gap, and he would make some nice tackles. And he was conservative in tackling too, where he wouldn't try to be too aggressive, where he would get beat in a foot race, where he would be a little bit conservative and kind of limit runs. But overall, yeah, impressed. But coverage, he's more sketchy than people realize he was. Trust me. Especially watching the film. But move on, Glenn. Pick number 3, or pick round 3, pick 79. Ardarius Stewart. Overall, you have to say, really disappointing rookie year. He couldn't get on the field. There were some rumors that he couldn't get the playbook down. But overall, for a 3rd-round pick, 6 receptions, 8 for 82 yards. Getting reps or out-repped by JoJo Natson at times, getting outplayed by him. Getting used with sweeps and stuff. It was definitely a disappointing year for Ardarius Stewart.
Hugely disappointing, and I'm really hoping it was just poor coaching decision, because as I said when the Jets signed Jeremy Curley, I was happy with the Curley signing, but not if it was going to take reps away from Ardarius Stewart. Clearly, it did. You kind of felt like Stewart never got as good of a look as he should have. I feel like we didn't see the Jets throw him the ball beyond the line of scrimmage till week 17, and it was really just it was just ridiculous to watch them. How they handled him. I felt like when you look at his college film, when you look at how he performed in the preseason, you thought he would be a bigger part of the offense, especially down the stretch when let's face it, the playoffs were out of the question realistically before the season started. But I understand you play for the playoffs when the season's going on. Once they were eliminated, you still didn't see them getting him involved in the offense enough. Really disappointing. And the next guy you're going to mention, Chad Hansen, he passed him on the depth chart. We saw some good things from him. He made some limited opportunities, but he made a couple of really nice catches. We saw him break some tackles in the middle of the field. So he obviously did enough that he passed Stewart on the depth chart and made some plays in very limited opportunities. So encouraged by that.
Yeah, even if though he did make some plays and he didn't get a lot of playing time opportunities, I would still say 9 catches for 94 yards is still overall disappointing. Now, is it more disappointing than
again? Yeah,
Stewart?
Is it him? Like if he got an opportunity, I think he would have been more productive. But I see what you mean. At the end of the day, the numbers are what they are.
Yeah. So
that's a hell of a catch. That's contested. That's a high ball. That's a nice grab.
Yeah, definitely, and great body control too. And something that you'll notice too, he doesn't just catch the ball here on the 9 versus Lattimore. He doesn't just tuck the ball into the chest where Lattimore can punch it out. He purposely tucks the ball away from Lattimore and turns his body away from him to secure the catch. So that's just fantastic body control in the air, and a nice catch. So Hansen definitely was more impressive than Stewart, where Stewart just didn't do anything. Even on if your forte is jet sweeps and running the ball and being aggressive, and you're getting out-repped by one of the worst players I've ever seen, JoJo Natson, that's not good. So overall from Hansen, a meh rookie year, I would say, but more impressed than Stewart, which isn't saying too much. Moving on, Jordan Leggett, he played 3 preseason games for got 5 receptions for 64 yards when on the IR. So overall, to say disappointing. Hopefully he comes back and he can play well in his second year. He was a guy who we didn't love the draft pick. He can be an okay receiver, but as a pass blocker, he's terrible at this point in his career. So
Yeah.
Disappointed he went on the IR, I guess is all you can really say for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I like his attitude. You know, he had this rep of being lazy, but I didn't see any issues. I don't think anyone saw any issues in camp. He looked like he was putting in the work, but he had a bulky knee that kept acting up throughout the season. I think he was active for a week or two, and even when he was active, he didn't really play. And then the knee acted up again, and they had to IR him. And it's one of those things, man, as fans, you know, especially as closely as we follow this team, it kills me to not know how he looked when he was healthy and practicing. But we got to wait till next year and see if he finds a way to get on the field and, you know, and make some plays.
Next guy, Glenn, Dylan Donahue. He played 4 games. He had 5 tackles in those 4 games in the regular season, and then he went to IR as well. Overall disappointing, injury or not, whatever. I said it when he drafted him. I'm not impressed with him. I think at best he's a guy who's maybe a reserve player and a guy who's going to be a special teamer. At that, I don't see the athletic ability from him to be a real contributor on any NFL team. So IR though, disappointing. So.
Yeah, you know, it's such a small sample size that you can't really give a fair assessment.
Yeah.
4 games as a part-time player. I felt like, you know, his last couple games he wasn't getting to the quarterback, but you could see him. It's one of those things where you saw him get some push and move some linemen around a little bit. And just at his size, you're like, he shouldn't even be able to do that. Like, at his size, going against offensive tackles, and you would just think he would get buried, but he didn't. So, you know, as much as they advertise, like, the effort and the fight and the grit, all that stuff is great, makes for a nice movie. And it was there, it was evident, but you got to produce. I'm not going to knock the guy for not producing in his first 4 games because there are a lot of guys who don't produce in their first 4 games. So next year we'll get another look at him. And, you know, anytime a guy plays a couple games and goes on IR, it's just an incomplete. You haven't seen enough of him to see what he can do.
Oh yeah, Glenn. Realistically, we should judge a draft like 3 years after it. I'm not saying these are.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but
yeah, I'm not saying we're looking at these guys after 1 year. We're not saying this is what the finished product is of any.
Yeah, we're not saying that this is a pass or a fail in the draft. We're just saying how they performed in year 1. Yeah,
and you know, because we have plenty of months until the draft and stuff, we have to kill time. And just fill content. So it is what it is. Glenn, the next guy, round 6 pick, 188, McGuire, 86 rushes for a 3.6 yard average, which is not good, but the offensive line was just so damn bad. 1 touchdown rushing the ball, and then 17 receptions for 177 yards, 1 touchdown in the receiving game. Overall, I was much more impressed than I thought I would be when we drafted him. I didn't think he was going to be a good player. I'm mad enough to admit that. Now this year, did he find lanes and did he cut the ball back as well as Powell and Forte? No, I don't think he's as good as runners as them yet. But overall, I was impressed with McGuire, and I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be, you know, a second or third type of running back in this league, which is fine for a guy in the 6th round. So overall, I was impressed.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for where you got him, the 6th round, I said, you know, after watching him a little bit, I said he reminded me of Bilal Powell. And during the season, he reminded me of a younger Bilal Powell, with a little more spring in his step. And, you know, as is the case with many running backs, if you give him a little bit of room, you know, he's going to need some room to make a play. And he just didn't get that this year, and none of the backs did really. And let's fix this O-line, and I think this is a guy who can be a playmaker. And really, when you talk about production and value, I think when all's said and done, he could end up being the best pick of the draft, you know, for the Jets.
Wow, even over Adams and May.
No, I'm saying production for value.
Oh, value. Okay.
Like what was he, 6th rounder?
Yeah, 6th rounder. Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll see. I like him overall. I do. The next 2 guys, we'll just wrap them up in 2. The 2 6th-round picks, 197 and 204. Jeremy Clark didn't play all year. We knew that because of his injury. Derek Jones played some special teams snaps, very few. No tackles. They didn't really play. So those are guys. If you get anything out of a 6th-round pick, you know, bravo. We'll see.
When you're talking about 6th and 7th rounders, it's like the goal is don't get cut. They didn't get cut. It was a successful season for them. Now next year they have a year under their belts, and hopefully find a way to contribute.
Yeah, so Glenn, let's just wrap up the show. Let's just talk some. Is there any other topics you want to hit on before I talk about some of the playoff games, or just wrap up our?
Not really. Just one piece of news here. Not huge news. I'll see if I can find it. Go. You keep going. I'll see if I can find it. Okay, so
I'm just gonna talk about the playoff game and stuff like that. So we always have audio, so Glenn can't make excuses of him not beating me this year, and the pick'ems, even though we're freaking close. We can tie actually, but the last week we left, we were both 53 and 31, and then we picked the games, and we picked the Falcons versus Eagles. We both picked the Falcons. They lost 15-10 to the Eagles, which is just surprising. The Falcons look terrible. It was absolutely terrible, that game. We both picked the Patriots, who beat the Titans 35-14, absolutely blew them out. We both picked the Steelers, who lost at home to the Jaguars 45-42 in a shootout. The Steelers I don't know how they let up 45 points to the Jaguars with Blake Bortles, and you know that they're going to run the ball with Fournette, and they just couldn't stop it, even though he didn't average a whole lot of yards per carry. And then the game I guess you're going to want to talk about, Glenn, the Sunday at 4:40, the Saints lost to the Vikings 29-24. I picked the Vikings. You picked the Saints. Fair to say, I was very excited with that Stephon Diggs touchdown at the end of the game.
You know, I didn't watch that live with the time difference. I watched the early game, and then that game was starting at like 1 a.m. or whatever it was over here, or midnight. And I just thought, man, I don't have it in me to stay up for this game. And needless to say, I woke up and like my entire Twitter feed was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, what happened? And then I turned it on and watched it, and I was very unhappy.
Yeah, so it was that was absolutely crazy. And I was watching that game. That's the first day I had the fever. But when that happened, I literally like jumped up in the middle of my house and just screamed like, no freaking way. Like, I don't know how if Marcus Williams, you even like go like fly back to New Orleans, or he just ducks his head and just doesn't even look where he's tackling. He just completely misses him and takes it out his own teammate. And Diggs just runs up the sideline for a 60-yard touchdown on 4th and whatever it was, and he did 10 yards and to get out of bounds with like 4 seconds on the clock to kick a really long field goal. That was absolutely crazy. So you went after that. You went 1-3. I went 2-2. So that brought my record to.
You feel for the guy, man.
Oh, my connection just got sketchy, but yeah. So that week I went 2 for 2. You went 1 for 3. So that brought my record to 55-33. You were 54-34, and then we both picked the Patriots, who beat the Jags 24-20 in a really good game where the Patriots lucked out on a lot of calls. They always get freaking calls. I'm not just saying that; they always get calls. And then we both picked the Vikings.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. They luck out a lot, and it's just ridiculous to watch their games. Like I watch their games, I'm like, they're gonna win. Doesn't matter if they're down, they're gonna win.
They're good, and it's I'm not even being a hater. Like I'm not denying they're great, but I remember I was sitting there leading up to the half, and I was about to tweet, you know, because the Pats were down a couple scores when they got the ball, and I almost tweeted out like, time for the refs to make a play, and sure enough, man, 2 pass interference calls, whatever it was. The big one, which was total bullshit down the left sideline, where it was just great coverage.
He did the classic Revis, where he used the sideline as a defender. He shoved down his body.
It wasn't a catchable ball, and the coverage was great. And they throw a flag, and you're like, man, come on, man! Like, I don't know how you watch that with a straight face and don't say, you know, something's up here, or just it's ridiculous. But that's what happens, man. The Patriots are Michael Jordan. And back in the day, if you went within 5 feet of Michael Jordan, you got a foul. Like, you don't go near Michael, and you don't beat the Patriots. The Miles Jack fumble recovery. If they don't blow the whistle, that's a Miles Jack touchdown, and the game is over. That's it. Yep. It's done. He picks up that fumble. The ref's like, whoa,
yeah,
stop. That dude's going to the end zone.
And it's funny, too, because like the refs don't help themselves either, because like after they score touchdowns, they romp to him and like congratulate them and laughing with them. After the game,
high-fiving Bill Belichick on the sideline. Yeah. They're looking at Robert Kraft and dabbing. They're like, woo!
Yeah,
you can't do that, man. Come on.
Yeah, it is crazy, and that's literally what Revis would do all the time, where he would use the sideline, where he would just slowly use the sideline and force the receiver out of bounds or to have no room on the sideline, and
Yeah.
that's what whatever that cornerback's name, I forget who it was. That's what they did, and they called it pass interference.
I think it was.
Yeah, it's not like he uses his
Was
arms.
it Bowie or Ramsey? I forget who it
I
was.
think it was Boye.
Yeah, I think so.
But okay, so yeah, we both picked the Patriots who beat the Jags 24-20, and we both picked the Vikings who got blown out by the Eagles, an embarrassing game, 38-7. I never thought I would turn a conference championship game off, but like after halftime when the Eagles scored and it was like 31-35 or I mean 35-7 or whatever, I was like, I'm just turning this off. So they got blown out.
Nick Foles go to the Super Bowl.
Like, what do they do if Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl and then what? Like, I know Wentz is gonna come back, but that's like kind of weird for them. Like, hey, you won a Super Bowl for us? Thanks. We'll see you later.
That's some good trade. It'd be like Dilfer with the Ravens.
Ravens, yeah.
It'd be like, look, man, we won a Super Bowl, but we know it wasn't because of you. But I mean, you might be able to get a pick for Nick Foles.
Yeah. So we're not gonna pick the Super Bowl now. And the funny thing is, like I said, I'm in the academy. I have to wake up at 3 o'clock.
We're gonna keep you in suspense. So you can wonder if we're going to pick Tom Brady or Nick Foles.
Well, we'll talk about it more, the matchups and stuff. But yeah, so we both went 1-1. So I'm 56-34, and you're 55-35. Glenn, you're going to have to pick the Eagles, or you lose. So it's either you're going to pick the Eagles, or we're going to tie it up, and then I'll be 1-1-0 against you, and you'll be 0-1-1 against me. So I'm still going to have that win on you from last season. It is what it is. Honestly, I lucked out with that Diggs. If it wasn't Diggs, I would be in the same position you are. So that I just got lucky.
Another way you lucked out is that I'm so damn lazy. I was sitting on my couch before that Eagles game started, and I wasn't sure they'd win that game, but I love that Eagles defense. And you shot me that text like, do you want to pick the other way? So, and I'm sitting on my couch literally, and I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, I should text Joe and take the Eagles. And I'm like, the phone's all the way over there. No big deal. Who cares? And then they won. I was like, damn it, I should have texted him.
Yeah. But, yeah, it was a crazy game. So, Glenn, is there anything else you want to finish up with? Is there any topics?
Callahan. That was the thing I was going to mention. Brian Callahan, that was something we didn't talk about. He was the Lions quarterbacks coach last year. He is reportedly coming in to interview for the same position with the Jets. And I believe the Titans are also bringing him in to interview for the same job. So, that's one name being floated. He's done some nice work with Matt Stafford, and the Jets are trying to bring him in to work with whoever their quarterback is next year. Okay. Josh-McCown.
Yeah, I'm not going to go crazy about it. If they like him, they like him. I don't know a whole bunch about quarterbacks coach. I know there's like a couple gurus out there. If they get them, yeah, it's great. But, Callahan, I'm not going to – off the top of my head, I don't know a whole bunch about him. So if they like him, they like him. Glenn, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this show up and are back next Wednesday? Oh, that's what I was going to say actually before. The thing that's going to suck is I'm not going to be able to watch the Super Bowl. Maybe.
Really?
Listen, those first like week and a half or even like the first 2 weeks of the month, they call that like the hell month, the hell week, because you're in the military. So they beat the shit out of you every day. They're putting lipstick on dudes. They're making sir, this recruit is a little bitch, sir. Like you have to like call, you're running around, put the bag down. Okay. Pick the bag back up, unzip it, throw all your shit everywhere.
Down.
Yeah, up, downs, running, sprints, that stuff. So I have to wake up at 3 a.m. The Super Bowl starts at 8:30. I'm not going to be able to stay up for the freaking Super Bowl. There's no way.
Yeah, I'll watch it, but it'll start at like 1:30 in the morning here, and I have college on Monday. So I'm
going to ask all the people who follow me on Twitter on this. And if I follow you on Twitter, which I don't follow a ton of people because I don't, there's limited news I want to see. Just don't tweet about the Super Bowl if you could until the next Friday, because I'm probably going to watch it.
I can tell you what's going to happen. The Patriots are going to get some calls, and they're going to win.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to spoil it for you, Joe. They're not going to get any penalties. The other team, the Eagles, they just threw a flag right now against the Eagles. They've already started.
They're probably watching film on what they can throw flags about the Eagles on.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm probably gonna watch like that Friday, which sucks, but it is what it is. Real life gets in the way sometimes. Okay, so we'll wrap the show up. Follow Glenn at AceFan23. Follow me at JoeRB31. Check out that Enunwa film review, 48 plays, and Adam should be up this week. Like I said, the shows for the next 4 months are only going to be an hour max. I have things to do. I'm sorry. I'm going to be pushing out content a little bit slower, but deal with it. So go on YouTube, subscribe, watch us on there. We appreciate all our listeners. We really, really do. Sorry we were gone for a week, but pneumonia really sucks. and we will be back next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and I'll be bald as all bald. So we look forward to that, and we'll talk to you then.